Chapter 1189. In the endless void outside of the desolate infinite land, the Kunlun Dragon King and the other dragon race experts felt their hearts skip a beat, and they felt agitated. The Fang's Dragon King's true spirit divine tattoo seemed to be disappearing from their divine senses. After Flame Dragon King Lu Yen, another Flame Dragon Master had fallen. The Tranquil Dragon King was even more dumbfounded. With the help of my demonic power, will Fang still be killed by that woman? The Kunlun Dragon King was even more agitated. He felt a boundless fire burning in his heart, and he seemed to feel his blood essence surging in the distance. This made him recall the scene when his dragon claws and dragon tail were severed by Lin Feng. The huge primordial heavenly dragon roared into the sky and pounced at Zhu Yi. The body of the dragon coiled around the Permitha bridge tightened, and the golden light and sky sword galaxy kept shaking. On the other side, the Jade Sky Dragon King roared and spat out endless black light that swept towards the immortal Dragon City. The immortal Dragon City had fallen into silence, but its foundation was strong. Even under the attack of the Jade Sky Dragon King's Jade Dragon Flames, it was still standing for a while as if it was indestructible. However, the Jade Dragon Flames were best at breaking techniques. Under the powerful Intent Realm, even a dimensional realm would be melted and destroyed. The immortal Dragon City, which was completely silent, was engulfed by the black light and started to float up and down. The surface of the sturdy city walls started to become mottled. The huge Great Wall suddenly glowed strangely, and the shape of a dragon vaguely appeared. It kept changing between the Great Wall and the huge heavenly dragon. Zhu Yi and Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper attacked and defended, and they cooperated well to block the Kuan Dragon King's attack. Since Emperor Qin Stonefeather was dead, Zhu Yi and Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper could use their battle strategies more freely. They were no longer in a hurry, and they could fight the Kuan Dragon King with more ease. As time passed, the cooperation between the two became better. The Kunlun Dragon King's Yuan Qi was injured when the Dragon Realm's defense was forcefully breached. As a result, his furious and ferocious attack was forcefully pushed back by Zhu Yi and Sword Venerable Tiangang. Although Lin Feng's creation Divine Light Crystal was being consumed rapidly, it was still supporting Zhu Yi's Permitha Bridge. The originally illusory ninth halo on the Golden Bridge had already disappeared, but there were still 8 colorful halos shining brightly. Amidst the magnificent golden light, there seemed to be 8 lofty gods appearing under the Golden Bridge at the same time. They reached out their hands together and lifted the Permitha Golden Bridge up. The golden rainbow that was enveloped by the divine light of black and white streaked across the sky at this moment. Celestial Dipper Sword Venerable also used his magic power at the same time. The celestial river that was formed by the sword light was dazzling, and tens of thousands of rays of light spread out together. The Kunlun Dragon King, who was wrapped around the Permitha Golden Bridge, was finally shaken off forcefully. Without waiting for the Kuan Dragon King to make his next move, the One Hua Tai Chi diagram formed by Zhu Yi's primordial spirit had already unfolded. After forcing the Kuan Dragon King back, it immediately merged with the Permitha Bridge and transformed into a towering giant that looked like a deity that had descended from the heavens. 8 colorful light circles appeared on the top of the giant's head, and black and white divine light shone on the edge of the golden light, shaking the heavens. He stretched out his hand and wrote the word E in the void, gathering the chi of heaven and earth to one point. Then he made 3 seals in a row. His power merged and turned into a fist force that seemed to be able to destroy heaven and earth. The fist force came crashing down on the Kuan Dragon King's head. With the help of the black and white divine light, the fist force was so powerful that even the Kuan Dragon King felt a chill down his spine. The giant heavenly dragon roared and revealed his true form. As the scales on his body opened and closed, a large amount of golden light shot out and condensed into a thick dragon cloud. His claw brazenly grabbed out and collided with the giant's fist seal. In the dark void, other than black and white, there was only the dazzling golden light that lit up the surrounding void. The void constantly shook and twisted. There were even dimensional realms and dimensional realms that were close to the battlefield that were shaken to the point where their outlines began to appear. Beneath the illumination of the golden light, they constantly shook like giant bubbles. Cracks even appeared on the surface of these bubbles, as if they would burst apart at any moment. The black and white divine light was being consumed. The crystallization of Lin Feng's divine light of creation was going to run out sooner or later. However, the Kuan Dragon King's eyes were filled with shock and anger. He looked at Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper. Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper turned into a shooting star and flew far away. His target was the Blue Sky Dragon King. Although Emperor Qin Stonefeather was dead, the original plan was still the one that had the highest chance of winning. Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper and Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper didn't continue attacking while Zhu Yi stalled the Kuan Dragon King. The Blue Sky Dragon King was shocked. His judgment of the situation was very accurate, and he knew what Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper was planning to do. If he was hit by Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper's Dharma-ending catastrophe, he would either die immediately or become extremely weak. Not only would he not be able to help the Kuan Dragon King, but he would also become the Kuan Dragon King's burden. The Blue Sky Dragon King was a decisive person. He didn't care about destroying the immortal Dragon City anymore. Instead, he condensed a black light to wrap around the immortal Dragon City. Then, a strange pattern appeared on his forehead. The pattern instantly covered his whole body and gave off a dazzling light. The light was boundless and flashed with black light. However, the color of the seawater was pure gold. It was the Mystic Sea. However, the Mystic Sea was in a very violent state. The passage that the Blue Sky Dragon King created was very unstable. It seemed like it could collapse at any time. Because the Blue Sky Dragon King created this passage, the flow of the spirit chi in the Mystic Sea became more chaotic and unstable. The Blue Sky Dragon King wanted to use the power of the Mystic Sea to guide him back to the Mystic Sea. However, due to the special circumstances, the construction of the passage was slower than usual. The Big Dipper Sword Venerable was very decisive. He didn't have any intention of exchanging a few blows with the Blue Sky Dragon King. He pointed his left index finger and 2 fingers at the Blue Sky Dragon King like a sword. A dark black gas turned into a straight black line and shot toward the Blue Sky Dragon King. Davis 5 declines, Dharma-ending calamity. Wherever the black gas passed, the entire world seemed to be weakening. It was like the end of the world was coming. It was irreversible. The Blue Sky Dragon King couldn't dodge. He could only take the Dharma-ending calamity head-on. His jade-like body lost its luster. It was as if he was covered in dirt. He emitted an unbearable stench that was even more disgusting than the Blood River True Water. The dragon race, which had always been proud and had the aura of an emperor, seemed to be the ruler of the world. At this moment, stains appeared on their bodies, and a large number of dragon scales fell off. The vast demonic energy fluctuation, and the majestic and terrifying dragon, might suddenly disappeared. It was as if they had fallen from the clouds high up in the sky into a muddy swamp. The nobles instantly turned into unkempt beggars in ragged clothes. The Blue Sky Dragon King let out a low roar. Be it his demonic power, his physical strength, or his demonic soul, all of them fell to the lowest point. The Big Dipper Sword Venerable looked at this scene expressionlessly. It's a pity that he survived the degeneration calamity. The Blue Sky Dragon King was powerful. Although he didn't have enough confidence, he didn't take the last step to the Dharma-ending realm like Huangshan Dragon King. He had accumulated a lot of power. Now that he was forced to go through the degeneration calamity, because of the Big Dipper Sword Venerable, he didn't die under the degeneration calamity. He survived it successfully. Although he looked miserable now, as long as he recovered from this period of weakness, he would enter the Dharma-ending realm and become a primordial heavenly dragon. However, all of that had to wait until he passed this stage. Although the Big Dipper Sword Venerable had also endured a Dharma-ending calamity, it was far from his limit. Although his power was also damaged, he could kill the Blue Sky Dragon King with a casual strike. The power of the Mystic Sea kept fluctuating, and the strange passageway gradually formed to bring the Blue Sky Dragon King back. However, the black light that wrapped around the immortal Dragon City was collapsing. The huge immortal Dragon City appeared again, but it couldn't follow the Blue Sky Dragon King into the Mystic Sea. Instead, it kept floating in the broken void. The Big Dipper Sword Venerable couldn't care less about the immortal Dragon City anymore. He quickly turned into a Milky Way and slashed at the Blue Sky Dragon King, trying to seize the last opportunity. However, the Kuan Dragon King roared again. He took a punch from Zhu Yi and turned into a stream of light. He instantly broke through the void and chased after the Big Dipper Sword Venerable. He clawed at the Kuan Dragon King. The Big Dipper Sword Venerable was helpless. The Milky Way formed by the sword light flipped in the void and slashed at the Kuan Dragon King's claw. The Kuan Dragon King's claw emitted a dazzling light. The Big Dipper Sword Venerable let out a muffled groan. And the heavenly sword Milky Way shattered. His body was revealed. His right hand that was holding the Big Dipper Sword Venerable was trembling nonstop. There was a white stream of light in the void. It was the Big Dipper Sword Venerable's damaged Great Tao essence. Zhu Yi, on the other hand, was following closely behind the Kunlun Dragon King. The Kunlun Dragon King let out a long roar, and his seemingly shortened dragon tail lashed out forcefully in the universe, shattering countless stars and colliding head-on with Zhu Yi. The black and white light on the golden giant that was formed by the Permitha Golden Bridge was gradually used up. Even the eighth colorful halo above its head was fading away. The golden giant turned around and turned back into the heaven-connecting golden bridge. The One Hua Tai Chi diagram fell from the sky and turned back into the human form of the purple-robed scholar. Zhu Yi stood on the golden bridge and stared at the Kuan Dragon King in front of him. He looked at the black sea that seemed to be connected to the void, the blue sky dragon king who had escaped into it, and the immortal dragon city that was floating in the shattered space, as if it was about to sink into the boundless sea of space. The immortal dragon city's dragon soul sacrificial ritual went out of control unexpectedly. The Kuan Dragon King's unfathomable strength, the mysterious power of the Black Sea, the unstable state of the immortal dragon city, the unknown changes and the chaotic situation of the immortal dragon city in the void. Everything seemed to be shrouded in a dense fog, making it hard for one to see clearly and grasp the situation. However, Zhu Yi's eyes were getting brighter and brighter at this moment. His mind was getting clearer and clearer. Chapter 1190. Ever since cultivating the third chapter of the scripture of the heavenly virtue that Lin Feng taught them, the true scripture of yin and yang returned to origin. Whether it is Wang Lin or Zhu Yi and the others, they have all integrated their own understanding of the great Tao of heaven and earth during their cultivation, evolving their own Tao of yin and yang. Within the heavenly virtue scripture, it was constantly derived and improved, climbing to new heights. Wang Lin's yin and yang Tao was the unification of the two great ways of destiny and defying destiny, which were polar opposites but closely related. After identifying this path and having the initial understanding, Wang Lin became the first among Lin Feng's disciples to step onto this path. As he continued on this path, the path of refining the spirit and returning to the void had already appeared in front of Wang Lin. At this moment, in the face of many pressing situations and powerful enemies, Zhu Yi also began to gradually and thoroughly understand his yin and yang Tao. The path of a boundless future was already gradually becoming clear. In the karma discussion with Buddhism in the past, Wang Lin had benefited the most, and Zhu Yi had also gained a lot. At this moment, it was no longer difficult for him to completely understand the last bit of truth that he had not fully understood in the past. Zhu Yi stood on the golden Permitha bridge and transformed into a human form for only a moment. Then he once again manifested his primordial spirit incarnation, turning into the appearance of the One Hua Tai Chi diagram. Hundreds of millions of light and dark characters floated above the Tai Chi diagram. These characters were all formed by the fusion of light and dark, mysterious and unfathomable. But at this moment, all the light and dark characters suddenly disintegrated together, turning into hundreds of millions of bright light rays and hundreds of millions of dark black lines. It was as if the boundless light and the boundless darkness corresponded. All the light rays gathered together, instantly magnifying the light and illuminating the void. All the black lines also gathered together, suddenly like a bottomless abyss, swallowing all the light. In this boundless light, the shadow of a Buddha rose faintly. From its appearance, it seemed to be one of the 5 Buddhas of Buddhism, the infinite light Buddha. In the dark abyss, there seemed to be a shadow of a Taoist wearing a Taoist robe. His expression was dark and gloomy. Now people would find him extremely unfamiliar. However, people from the Middle Ages would be able to recognize that this person was one of the prime diabolism sects of the Middle Ages. He was the founder of the shadow diabolism, the dark shadow diabolism. This person unearthed the ruins left behind by the immemorial Dark Emperor and obtained part of the Dark Emperor's orthodoxy. In the end, he established his own sect and founded the Shadow Fiend Path. The two figures stood facing each other, as if they were two extremes of light and darkness. However, at this moment, a change occurred once again. The boundless light gradually disappeared. The boundless light was no longer dazzling. Instead, it was extremely clear. It gave off a feeling that there were no secrets hidden in it. It was as if anyone could understand, recognize, observe, and understand it. On the other hand, the dark shadow devil Exalt's figure gradually vanished, and the boundless darkness changed its appearance as well. It wasn't pure and mysterious darkness any longer, and it was instead a type of even deeper darkness. It was obscure, invisible, unknown, indescribable, and indescribable. It was bewildering and difficult to understand. The two profound concepts stood in opposition and gradually fused together. They seemed to be in stark opposition to each other, but they seemed to transform and merge with each other. When the two concepts of light and darkness fused together, they finally formed a huge word. It looked clear and simple, but it also seemed inexplicable and difficult to grasp. This word was the word E, but it looked completely different from when the light and darkness characters were formed. It was clearly the same word, but at this moment, it seemed to contain an even more profound truth. The word E appeared on the Taiji diagram formed by Zhu Yi's essence soul. Then it gradually changed its appearance, splitting into 8 and separating into 8 directions. Zhu Yi's clear voice sounded in the void. The heavens move vigorously, and a gentleman ceaselessly strives to improve himself. The earth moves vigorously, and a gentleman carries goods with virtue. The wind follows the wind, and a gentleman acts according to his orders. The thunder gradually shakes, and a gentleman cultivates through fear. Kindness is like water, and a gentleman begins with planning. Fire is like man, and a gentleman distinguishes things by their race. Footsteps and shoes, and a gentleman distinguishes the will of the people. Zhen Shanqian, and a gentleman benefits the few with the many. The word E seemed to split into 8 images, condensing on the Taiji diagram. It was the 8 trigrams of mountains and lakes after the heaven and earth, wind and lightning. After that, the 8 trigrams continued to evolve. It wasn't in terms of power or substance, but it was constantly clarifying all kinds of truths and answering all kinds of questions. Above the Taiji diagram, as the myriad of things continued to evolve, the Kunlun Dragon King, Celestial Dipper Sword Venerable, Jade Sky Dragon King, and Honing Dragon King, who was about to leave this place due to the power of the Xianxi, had a strange feeling in their hearts at the same time. It was as if there was a pair of eyes staring at them from the Taiji diagram. There was no sadness, no joy, no emotion, only a vague belief, a desire to know everything and distinguish everything. Other than the Kunlun Dragon King and Sword Venerable Tiangang, who were slightly better off, the Blue Sky Dragon King and Honing Dragon King felt as if everything about them was being seen through by that pair of eyes. Although the Blue Sky Dragon King was extremely weak, he calmed himself down, and the anxiety in his heart eased a lot. However, Honing Dragon King felt that all his movements were exposed to that pair of eyes. He even had a ridiculous feeling that the other party seemed to understand him better than he understood himself. At this moment, Zhu Yi's calm voice came from the Wenhua Taiji painting. The power of the profound sea is indeed profound. However, the profound sea is extremely unstable at this moment. There are many flaws in the way it receives the profound sea. Without these flaws, Blue Sky Dragon King, you would have been able to retreat safely. As he spoke, the Taiji diagram and the Permitha bridge suddenly merged. Then, a golden rainbow flashed across the void, traversing endless space in an instant, and appeared in front of the Blue Sky Dragon King. The Kunlun Dragon King roared and forced Sword Venerable Tiangang back. He turned around and pounced at Zhu Yi. Kunlun Dragon King, you were injured by my master in the past, and it affected you greatly. As Zhu Yi spoke, the golden rainbow formed by the Permitha Golden Bridge suddenly trembled. The Taiji diagram and the Golden Bridge fused together, turning into a giant that could support the heavens and the earth. 7 colorful halos shone on top of his head, and the mysterious diagram of the Tao of Change was still floating above his head. Zhu Yi's body suddenly flashed, and he suddenly split into thousands of clones. That huge golden giant actually split into countless figures in an instant. Each of the giants was majestic, and their bodies flashed with golden light. 7 halos revolved above their heads, and the Yi-Dao diagram rotated silently above their heads. This was the primordial Dark Emperor's ultimate technique, the One Yuan Dark Shadow Body, which was later passed down to the Shadow Demon Dao. The Kunlun Dragon King's eyes turned even colder, and he let out a low roar that sounded like muffled thunder. He suddenly opened his mouth and spat out a large amount of golden dragon flames. The destructive power of the Fire Dragon race's dragon fire, the vast magic power of the Yellow Dragon race, and the magic power of the Jade Dragon race's Jade Dragon flames were all gathered into one body, and it swept across the void. The Dark Emperor had fallen in the hands of the Dragon race's absolute sovereign, Xianshang. Before that, the Dark Emperor's One Yuan Dark Shadow Body had once been a problem for many experts of the demon race. Absolute sovereign Xianshang had broken this technique, and his experience was naturally passed down by the dragon race. However, the Kunlun Dragon King didn't look relaxed at this moment. Although his dragon flames swept across the void, and a large number of Zhu Yi's shadow clones were destroyed, Zhu Yi's clones seemed to be infinite. The dragon flames only destroyed the clones, and the Kunlun Dragon King couldn't find the real Zhu Yi. Kunlun Dragon King, you know it yourself, right? With your strength, you should be able to break through my One Yuan Dark Shadow Body. But now, you don't have the strength to do so. It was as if thousands of Zhu Yis were speaking at the same time in the void. Unfortunately, I couldn't see through this before. It was only after I comprehended this new technique that I was able to see through some of your weaknesses and find the best way to deal with you. As they spoke, although most of the shadow clones were destroyed by the Kunlun Dragon King, there were still many clones that appeared in front of the Blue Sky Dragon King. This should not be your only weakness. However, this new technique of mine hasn't been perfected yet, so I can only see through this for now. I can't defeat you now, but you won't be able to protect the Blue Sky Dragon King. When the Kunlun Dragon King was attacking Zhu Yi, Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper was also attacking the Kunlun Dragon King. Looking at the scene in front of him, he had a clear understanding. Tianlong Kuan is still very powerful. His demon power is boundless, and he is proficient in all kinds of Tao of heaven and earth. In a battle of attrition, his magic power is vigorous and he is not afraid at all. When he activates his full strength, his instantaneous explosive power is still very strong. However, after an intense explosive power, the circulation of his demon power will be slightly sluggish, and it will be difficult for him to unleash his full strength continuously. To break through the One Yuan Dark Shadow Body, one had to rely on the advantage of strength. One had to spread out the area of attack and attack with the real body and the clones at the same time. Otherwise, it would be hard for anyone to attend to one thing and lose sight of the other. This was because when the clones were destroyed, Zhu Yi was constantly producing new shadow clones. Therefore, the Kunlun Dragon King's attacks had to ensure that they covered a large area of attack, and that they had to be strong enough to deal with a single target and be sustained. If it was before he was injured by Lin Feng, this wouldn't be a problem for the Kunlun Dragon King. However, at this moment, he felt a little powerless. The Kunlun Dragon King was actually very clear about his own weakness, and he had been hiding it very well. Previously, Zhu Yi, Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper, and Stonefeather hadn't noticed it. But now Zhu Yi had seen through this problem, and he had taken the most targeted measures. In fact, if the Kunlun Dragon King was given enough time, he would still be able to break the One Yuan Dark Shadow Body. After all, to Zhu Yi, using the One Yuan Dark Shadow Body would consume a lot of energy if his Dark Shadow Body was constantly broken. But now, Zhu Yi didn't seek to defeat the Kunlun Dragon King. With Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper holding him back, he forcefully shook off the Kunlun Dragon King and came before the Blue Sky Dragon King. Everything happened in an instant. The mystic sea power was sweeping up the Blue Sky Dragon King and was about to disappear into the void. Seeing this, Zhu Yi smiled and said, "Indeed, it seems that the space is unstable, and the domain passageway seems to be distorting and collapsing at any moment. However, the real reason is that there has been a change in the concept of time, causing this flaw in the receiving method. The opportunity is fleeting. If my method isn't right, the opportunity will be lost. However, Blue Sky Dragon King, you are destined to not be able to leave today. The golden giant that Zhu Yi had transformed into put his palms together, and then his palms spread out to the sides. In the center, there was a graceful brilliance. It was fleeting, and in the blink of an eye, it lit up. In the midst of life and death, it showed the change of time in an instant, and the profound concept of the passing of a breath. Chapter 1191. The One Hua Tai Chi diagram formed by Zhu Yi's primordial spirit merged with the Permitha bridge and transformed into a huge golden giant. Between the golden giant's palms, a ball of profound brilliance appeared. In an instant, it flickered and flickered, containing the true meaning of instant time. This was the instant brilliance that he inherited from Lin Feng. Zhu Yi spread his arms, and the light scattered in all directions like sand. It seemed to have transformed into a river of time that was ever-changing. Under Zhu Yi's control, the river-like light landed on the crack in space that was guiding the Blue Sky Dragon King out of this place. The space crack, which was already shaking non-stop, suddenly stopped moving. Then it became even more distorted. The Xianxi in the illusion of light and shadow seemed to roar even more violently, but it also caused the illusion of light and shadow to collapse even more. The Blue Sky Dragon King's body suddenly stopped in the void. He was shocked. Then he saw the distant Xianxi gradually disappear, and the illusion formed by the guidance method twisted into a black hole. The space kept shattering, and the black hole kept expanding. Terrifying cracks spread out in the surrounding void. The pitch-black universe was like a piece of paper. With the Blue Sky Dragon King as the center, it was constantly being torn to the periphery. The Kuan Dragon King roared and rushed to Zhu Yi again. The golden giant that Zhu Yi had transformed into was fearless. He stared at the Kuan Dragon King, and the diagram of change of way above his head kept changing. In Zhu Yi's consciousness, there seemed to be a clear and bright light in the void. Among these crisscrossing and disorderly light, there was a large number of blurry air masses floating in the air. It's a bit difficult, but it's enough for now. Zhu Yi's body suddenly turned in the void. That huge body seemed to have instantly turned into a faint stream of light and disappeared. In Zhu Yi's own divine sense, he was shuttling through the clear and bright light in the void. As he traveled, the light moved horizontally and vertically, and he saw that the blurry air masses began to disappear one after another. In the eyes of the Kuan Dragon King and Sword Venerable Tiangang, Zhu Yi's body suddenly lit up as he faced the Kuan Dragon King's terrifying attack. Although it was still a golden radiance, the concept of power contained in this radiance was not only the majestic principle of the Golden Permitha Bridge, surpassing everything and leading everything, but there were also many other concepts of power. These concepts were surprisingly similar to the great Tao of heaven and earth that the Kuan Dragon King's primordial heavenly dragon mystic power. Although it wasn't complete and wasn't the full heavenly dragon mystic power, and it wasn't as strong as the Kuan Dragon King's primordial heavenly dragon mystic power, and the Kuan Dragon King's mystic power, E, were still able to suppress the Kuan Ee. Although it was incomplete and not the complete heavenly dragon divine art, and although it was still inferior in terms of pure strength and was still suppressed by the Kunlun Dragon King, the gap in strength between the two had been greatly reduced. The most important thing was that his sudden change had stunned the Kunlun Dragon King. In Zhu Yi's consciousness, the clear and bright light in front of him was increasing, and the blurry air masses were decreasing. Gradually, the thing that was previously covered by the thick fog was revealed. It was a primordial celestial dragon of unfathomable length that seemed to fill the heavens. The heavenly dragon seemed to be in a deep sleep, and didn't have any reaction to Zhu Yi. The primordial heavenly dragon was still covered by a lot of fog, but the amount of air masses was decreasing. The body of the heavenly dragon started to show more and more in front of Zhu Yi. As his consciousness cleared away the fog, in reality, Zhu Yi was also dealing with the furious Kuan Dragon King's storm-like attacks. The concepts contained in the heavenly dragon mystic power are too profound. Even though there's a big gap between my cultivation level and this heavenly dragon Kuan's, I've already benefited a lot. Zhu Yi's expression was calm. Other than the incomplete heavenly dragon radiance, he used the first Yuan dark shadow body again to fight the Kuan Dragon King in the most effective way. Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper looked at Zhu Yi in shock. He had a complicated look in his eyes. What exactly is he? However, he still pulled himself together and used his sword Dao to activate the ancient Celestial Dipper sword to attack the Kuan Dragon King. The Kuan Dragon King was shocked and angry. He kept roaring, but he couldn't do anything to Zhu Yi and Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper. With Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper helping to share the burden, Zhu Yi kept switching between his real body and the Dark Shadow doppelgangers. Although the Kuan Dragon King wanted to protect him, the moment he was distracted by Zhu Yi and Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper, Zhu Yi's real body had already switched with the Dark Shadow doppelganger. He moved away from the Kuan Dragon King and came before the Blue Sky Dragon King. The weakened Blue Sky Dragon King felt a chill in his heart. The giant formed by the fusion of Zhu Yi and the Permitha Golden Bridge had already slammed its palm down. The Blue Sky Dragon King found it ironic and ridiculous that there was a heavenly dragon's radiance among the tens of thousands of golden lights. Although the state of power contained in this light was incomplete, the Blue Sky Dragon King was very familiar with it. As long as he recovered from his current weakened state, he would be able to enter the Dharma-ending realm and achieve the body of the primordial celestial dragon. After he became a celestial dragon, the radiance that was attacking him would be even more perfect and complete. Because he was born as a Jade Dragon, in terms of the Jade Dragon's ability to break through all techniques, he would surpass other primordial celestial dragons of the same level. But now, a human cultivator had unleashed that power to crush his head with a single palm strike. At the last moment of the Blue Sky Dragon King's life, he couldn't resist and could only watch as Zhu Yi's palm slammed down on him. He felt that it was ridiculous. The last sound he heard was the Kunlun Dragon King's angry but helpless roar. The Blue Sky Dragon King was the leader of the Blue Dragon Clan. He was the fourth most powerful person in the Xianhai Dragon Clan, only inferior to the Yuan Dragon King, the Kunlun Dragon King, and the Shun Dragon King. He was only one step away from the Dharma-ending realm. Even under the condition that he survived the Dharma-ending tribulation of Sword Venerable Tiangang, he had almost completed the initial tribulation. As long as he recovered from the last tribulation, he would achieve the body of the primordial celestial dragon and enter the Dharma-ending realm, becoming the fourth great demon of the Dragon Clan to achieve the Dharma-ending realm. However, he was killed by the second disciple of the Mystic Gate's sect master, Zhu Yi, in the void outside the realm. Far away from the battlefield, Honing Dragon King watched the scene in a daze. He felt a deep chill in his heart. During the fierce battle with the Taishu Temple in the Xianhai Sea, the Haotian mirror of the Taishu Temple suddenly became unstable. As a result, the Dragon Clan suppressed the Haotian mirror and forced it into a defensive position. The Dragon Clan powerhouses finally exhaled and fought their way out of the Xianhai Sea. They even defeated the Great Qin Dynasty and the Immortal Dragon City, killed Qin Emperor Stonefeather, and were about to completely destroy the Immortal Dragon City. The Immortal Dragon City had been a great humiliation since the primordial era. At that time, the Blue Sky Dragon King, Honing Dragon King, and the other Dragon Clan powerhouses would never have thought that the situation would take a turn for the worse. Zhu Yi and the Tiangang Sword Venerable, who were trapped by the Kunlun Dragon King, suddenly came out. The Tiangang Sword Venerable even injured the Blue Sky Dragon King with the Dharma-ending tribulation. They thought that they could escape safely with the Xianhai Sea receiving spell. However, Zhu Yi broke the receiving spell and killed the Blue Sky Dragon King despite the Kunlun Dragon King's pressure. Honing Dragon King was filled with bitterness when he recalled how high-spirited he was when he first came out of the Xianhai Sea. In addition to Dragon King Lu Yan, who had died in the hands of Zhu Yi, the Dragon Clan had undoubtedly suffered heavy losses when they came out of the Xianhai Sea. It was the most serious loss they had suffered since the end of the war between the two worlds. What shocked Honing Dragon King even more was that Zhu Yi's strength had increased without warning. It was even more bizarre and inexplicable. In terms of cultivation level, Zhu Yi was still at the primordial spirit incarnation realm. After Lin Feng's divine light of creation disappeared, the Permitha Golden Bridge was still surrounded by 7 colorful halos. However, as the diagram of changes above Zhu Yi's head spun, it seemed to contain an indescribable strange power. This sudden change had directly taken the Blue Sky Dragon King's life. Zhu Yi was Lin Feng's second disciple. Because he had the Dharma treasure of creation, the Permitha Golden Bridge, he had always been regarded as the strongest among Lin Feng's disciples. He was also thought by the demon clan's powerhouses to be the only one among Lin Feng's disciples who had the ability to participate in the battle of the Dharma-ending realm powerhouses. However, being able to participate in the battle and having the ability to kill a powerhouse like the Blue Sky Dragon King were two completely different things. At this moment, he had a powerhouse like Sword Venerable Tiangang fighting alongside him. However, other than the Blue Sky Dragon King, his opponent was also the Kuan Dragon King, an unparalleled great demon who could easily defeat Sword Venerable Tiangang. After today's battle, Zhu Yi's name would be known throughout the entire Great Heaven primordial world. It was not only because he was the disciple of the Celestial Gates sect master Lin Feng, nor was it because he had the Dharma treasure of creation, the Permitha Golden Bridge. It was also because he had completely sublimated his own potential to become a terrifying force that would make people look at him. After Wang Lin, Zhu Yi had also stepped onto the world's biggest stage. He had started moving from the edge of the stage to the center. Although Sword Venerable Tiangang was still pained by the fact that Zhu Yi had teamed up with him to fight the Kuan Dragon King, he was also thinking about a lot of things. To him, if it was a pure one-on-one fight, it would not be difficult to kill the Blue Sky Dragon King. Moreover, when Zhu Yi killed the Blue Sky Dragon King, the Blue Sky Dragon King had already been hit by his Dharma-ending tribulation. The Blue Sky Dragon King was extremely weak because of the tribulation, so he could not fight back against Zhu Yi, who had the Permitha Bridge with him. However, to kill the Blue Sky Dragon King under the double protection of the Xianhai ritual and the Kuan Dragon King was extremely difficult. At least, Sword Venerable Tiangang knew that he had already given up on killing the Blue Sky Dragon King the moment the Xianhai ritual was activated. Everything that happened after that caught him off guard. At this moment, looking at Zhu Yi and the Permitha Golden Bridge, Celestial Dipper Sword Venerable had mixed feelings in his heart. Celestial Sect of Wonders. The Kuan Dragon King was also staring at Zhu Yi. His eyes were cold and emotionless, only filled with boundless killing intent. Suddenly, a voice rang in his ears. Kuan, retreat quickly. It was the Yuan Dragon King's voice. The Kuan Dragon King frowned. I haven't lost yet. Today, I will kill this brat in front of me even if I am severely injured. Yuan Dragon King's voice was calm and deep. I already know about what happened to Jade Sky, but I can't leave the Profound Sea yet. The Profound Gates Master, Lin Feng, already has the intention to leave the Spirit Abyss Mountain. The Profound Handle won't try to stop him. Even though he's here for Yudu that has reappeared, if you continue to stay there, he might very well go and find you first. Chapter 1192. Yuan Dragon King's words made the Kuan Dragon King even angrier. Last time, I had to retreat because you were still recovering from your tribulation, and Shenyi hadn't reached the Dharma-ending realm yet. Now that you've recovered and Shenyi has reached the Dharma-ending realm, I don't have to worry anymore. No matter how strong the master of the Celestial Sect is, he's not enough to make me fear him. At most I'll die. Instead of retreating like a coward, I'd rather die fighting here today. Yuan Dragon King's reaction was obviously within Yuan Dragon King's expectations. His tone didn't change at all. He said calmly, if you continue to fight, it's still unknown whether you can avenge Blue Sky Dragon. However, the immortal dragon city that the humans made with the remains of the ancestral dragon still exists. The Kuan Dragon King's expression stiffened. The anger in his eyes became even more intense, and he felt deeply humiliated. It wasn't because of the encounter between him and Blue Sky Dragon King. Instead, it was because of the immortal dragon city, which had been a great humiliation for the entire dragon race since the primeval age. Yuan Dragon King's calm tone was like a surging ocean, and he couldn't help but reveal some anger. Don't forget why you guys came out of the Xianhai Sea. Whenever he thought of the existence of the immortal dragon city, even the current #1 powerhouse of the dragon race couldn't suppress his anger and resentment. The Kunlun Dragon King looked at the dark void. The black hole caused by the destruction of the mysterious sea-guiding ritual was still unstable under the influence of Zhu Yi, the Kunlun Dragon King, and Sword Venerable Tiangang. However, the size of the black hole had shrunk drastically, as if it would calm down soon. In the depths of the black hole, one could vaguely see the immortal dragon city slowly disappearing into the black hole. After losing its master's control, the Dharma treasure's origin spirit fell into a deep slumber. At this moment, it gradually disappeared into the void. The power of the black hole couldn't devour it, so the immortal dragon city would continue to drift aimlessly in the endless void like a lonely boat. This endless drift would only stop when the treasure's origin spirit woke up from its slumber. Zhu Yi also looked toward the immortal dragon city. The diagram of changes above his head kept expanding. Suddenly, the current situation of the immortal dragon city appeared in his mind. The information was messy and disorderly, and most of it was useless. However, there were many important tips and tricks, allowing Zhu Yi to become the person with the clearest grasp of the current situation in Immortal Dragon City. A look of understanding appeared in his eyes. That sacrificial ritual actually caused such a huge change. It's really unexpected. Kunlun Dragon King suddenly used his demonic power to sweep Honing Dragon King away, before pouncing towards Immortal Dragon City. Zhu Yi saw this and immediately acted to stop him. Celestial Dipper Sword Venerable looked at Immortal Dragon City. His eyes also flickered as he joined the battle. The battle between the three experts shook the void, causing the black hole to gradually collapse and the Immortal Dragon City to sink into it. Kunlun Dragon King raised his head and roared angrily. He used the Dragon Emperor Heavenly Melody, which condensed into waves of golden ripples that spread in all directions. Wherever the ripples reached, the void shattered again, revealing the Immortal Dragon City again. When the golden ripples landed on the Immortal Dragon City, it was as if the Immortal Dragon City was plated with a layer of golden radiance. However, after a moment of silence, Zhu Yi suddenly opened his mouth and let out a long roar. His roar seemed to contain the roar of the dragon race, but it also sounded like a scholar who had been cultivating for a long time. His roar also seemed to condense into a white gas that flashed with golden light. It soared into the sky and sliced the golden ripples formed by the Kunlun Dragon King's roar like a sharp blade. Although it wasn't like the Kunlun Dragon King's Dragon Emperor Heavenly Melody that could cover the entire universe, it was concentrated and could interfere with the Kunlun Dragon King. After his interruption, the golden ripples formed by the Dragon Emperor Heavenly Melody immediately condensed again and broke the white gas. However, the Immortal Dragon City had already sunk into darkness again. However, Zhu Yi was also swept by the golden ripples and was sent flying backward. However, he quickly stabilized his footing and went to face the Kunlun Dragon King again. The Kunlun Dragon King suddenly turned his head and stared at Zhu Yi with a pair of cold eyes. The killing intent and anger in his eyes almost froze the entire void. He fixed his gaze on Zhu Yi and Sword Venerable Tiangang. His giant dragon head nodded slightly, but he didn't say anything. His body suddenly became ethereal, turned into a golden light, and instantly disappeared in the void. The Kunlun Dragon King had attained the body of the primordial celestial dragon, and possessed many great Daos. Among them, the Hui dragon race's ability to shift and transform the void was naturally included. Therefore, the strength of his escape technique was far beyond that of the ordinary demon race. The Kunlun Dragon King had attained the body of the primordial celestial dragon, and possessed many great Daos. Among them, the Hui dragon race's power of shifting and transforming the void was naturally included. Therefore, the strength of his escape technique was far beyond that of the ordinary demon race. Celestial Dipper Sword Venerable sent the Kuan Dragon King off with his eyes. Then he closed his eyes and kept the ancient Dipper Sword. He lowered his head and looked at his own body. There were a few scars on his body, and there were white spots of light drifting out from them. It was as if he was bleeding. After the Kunlun Dragon King left, Sword Venerable Tiangang closed his eyes and put away the ancient Sword Venerable Tiangang. He lowered his head and looked at his body. There were several severe wounds, and white light spots were drifting in the wounds. It was as though he was bleeding. The giant formed by the fusion of Zhu Yi and the Permitha Golden Bridge also turned into a flowing light in the void. The Golden Bridge and the Wenhua Tai Chi diagram were revealed again. The Yi Dao diagram disappeared, and the Wenhua Tai Chi diagram turned back into a human form. Standing on the Permitha Golden Bridge, Zhui said, "It's very difficult." Because of the sudden change in the sacrificial ritual, Stonefeather's magic power imprint was erased from the Immortal Dragon City. Now that the Immortal Dragon City is lost in the void, it will be very difficult for the Great Qin dynasty to find this treasure. He looked at the sword Venerable Tiangang and said, "On the other hand, the Kunlun Dragon King's Dragon Emperor Heavenly Melody shook the Immortal Dragon City and left some of his demon power imprint on it. Although it will be difficult for him to find the Immortal Dragon City, it will be much easier than the Great Qin dynasty now that he has some clues." When the changes in the Immortal Dragon City completely settle down, and the flow of spirit qi is no longer chaotic, the Kunlun Dragon King might be able to find the Immortal Dragon City using the imprint. The sword Venerable Tiangang also turned to look at Zhu Yi, but he didn't say anything. Zhu Yi also didn't continue on this topic. Instead, he said to the sword Venerable Tiangang, "No matter what, I have to thank you for your help." The sword Venerable Tiangang didn't say anything, but his divine sense reverberated in the void. "You're welcome." The Blue Sky Dragon King and Flame-Flowing Dragon King were killed, and the Kunlun Dragon King and Honing Dragon King escaped. The other dragons in the Infinite Wilderness Land were also forced to retreat. The Great Qin dynasty cultivators who were fighting with them heaved a sigh of relief. Lord Ruyang Shizongmao, who had been severely injured by Dragon King Honing and by An Great Sage, and could only barely defend against An Great Sage's pressure, could only let out a sigh of relief as he watched An Great Sage and the experts of the dragon race leave. Then he saw that the An Great Sage retreated in a different direction from the dragon race. This made him feel frustrated, but at the same time, he had more and more doubts. He racked his brains but couldn't figure out what the relationship between the Bayan and the dragon race was, and what enmity he had with the Great Qin dynasty. However, the thing that worried Shizongmao the most at the moment wasn't the An Great Sage and the dragon race, but the continuous bad news. The Great Qin Emperor Stonefeather was killed by the dragon race, and the Immortal Dragon City was missing. Half of the Great Qin dynasty's sky collapsed, and if they didn't deal with it properly, it might even collapse completely. The Great Qin dynasty was now at a critical juncture that concerned the survival of the dynasty. A little carelessness could cause them to fall into the abyss. Shizongmao was also seriously injured and couldn't fight anymore. To him, the most important thing was to lead the remaining Great Qin cultivators back to the Divine Land as soon as possible. The capital of the Great Qin dynasty, West Hill City. Nanming monarch Shizongtang, who was guarding West Hill City, had already sent other Great Qin cultivators to the entrance of the southern wilderness realm to receive them. Not long ago, the Great Qin dynasty that was still domineering and had chased the demons into the infinite desolate mainland was now in a precarious situation where it was on the verge of collapse. Zhu Yi and sword Venerable Tiangang didn't advance rashly. Instead, they gathered Xianmen Tianzong and the Shu Mountain cultivators and temporarily returned to the Divine Land through the Realm Passage. They stayed at the exit of the southern wilderness realm to monitor the situation on the other side. What made them uneasy was that although the Kunlun Dragon King had retreated, the other primordial heavenly dragon, Huangshan Dragon King, had come out of the Xian Sea and arrived at the infinite wilderness realm. Although his whereabouts were uncertain and he didn't deliberately get close to the entrance of the Realm Passage, the news that came from time to time showed that this demon was clearly watching this Realm Passage. Obviously, the Kunlun Dragon King had temporarily returned to the Xian Sea to recuperate, and another expert of the Dharma-ending realm of the dragon race had replaced him. Compared to the hot-tempered Kunlun Dragon King, Shin Dragon King's temperament was obviously much calmer. However, he was like a mountain, giving people a heavy sense of oppression. Although Shin Dragon King didn't take any substantial action, and even his whereabouts were unpredictable, he would show his existence from time to time, which made Zhu Yi and sword Venerable Tiangang unable to leave easily. Both sides fell into a stalemate. While Zhu Yi, sword Venerable Tiangang, and the Great Qin dynasty were fighting with the dragon race, Lin Feng, who was on the Spirit Abyss mountain range, also started to make his move. At the moment, Lin Feng wasn't at the peak of Jade Jing Mountain. Instead, he was in the mysterious Heaven-Time Light Grotto Heaven at the peak of the mysterious Heaven Treasure Tree. As long as he didn't fall into the state of thoughtless tranquility, he could deal with the changes in the outside world freely. He sat on the small mysterious Heaven Treasure Tree in the Grotto Heaven. His eyes were clear, and he kept thinking about the situation in front of him. The Yudu race had returned to the Heaven Primordial Great World. This was undoubtedly a huge nightmare for the human cultivation world. Under the current situation, it wasn't good for Lin Feng to continue guarding the Spirit Abyss mountain range. He had to return to the Divine Land, or the Yudu race would turn the Divine Land upside down. The Great Sage, the Enchantress, and Great Saint Zhu Yan were naturally very clear about the situation, so they didn't have the intention to stop Lin Feng from leaving. They also wouldn't fight to the death with Lin Feng for the Yudu race. If Lin Feng returned to the Divine Land to deal with the Yudu race, they would have no one to restrain them, and they could move freely. Just as the Great Sage and the other great demons were thinking about this, Lin Feng's voice suddenly came from Jade Jing Mountain. You guys seem to be very happy? There's nothing to be happy about. I'm indeed leaving this place, but I can leave but you can't. After saying that, a flowing light suddenly flew out from the mysterious Heaven-Time Light Grotto Heaven, and shone in the sky above Jade Jing Mountain. Chapter 1193. Previously, Lin Feng had restrained the Great Sage of all heavens, and the Enchantress at Spirit Abyss Mountain alone. Meanwhile, the Taishu Temple had restrained the dragon race in the mysterious sea, restricting the movements of most of the strong practitioners of the demon race. Thus, it was convenient for the other strong practitioners of the human race to move. That was how they got their advantage in the early stages of the war between the two worlds. After that, although there was a sudden change in the mysterious sea, as long as they could withstand the fiercest and most unexpected wave of the demon race's counterattack, the situation could still be maintained at a stalemate. However, with the return of the Yudu race, the situation was completely different. If many strong practitioners of Yudu descended on the Divine Land now, it would undoubtedly bring disaster to the human cultivation world. If Lin Feng left Spirit Abyss Mountain to assist the Divine Land, the happiest people would undoubtedly be the ancient Devil Ape race and the Enchantress. The initiative would shift from the hands of the Yudu race to their hands, and the situation would still be extremely advantageous to the demon race. When Lin Feng was restrained by the Yudu race, the three great demons of the last day's realm would also form a terrifying force. However, this matter was also within Lin Feng's consideration. If he were to leave the ancient Devil Ape race and Heavenly Enchantment Great Sage behind and deal with the Yudu race himself, it would be no different from tearing down the east wall to pay the west wall. Putting out fires like this wouldn't be of much help to the overall situation. Instead, he would be led by the nose by the demon race, constantly mobilizing them. Such a passive response wasn't what Lin Feng wanted. If he wanted to turn the situation around, he had to take the initiative to attack. Thus, after knowing that Yudu had returned, Lin Feng's first reaction was to enter Mysterious Heaven's Time Light Grotto Heaven, other than spreading the news to the other powers of the human race. Congratulations to the host for completing the main mission too. 2. Special reward for the main mission released. Looking at the two balls of light floating in front of him, Lin Feng blinked. This is a little out of my expectations. Looks like handing in the mission late was indeed worth it. However, it's still a happy accident. Lin Feng put away one of the balls of light, and then gently tapped the other ball of light with his finger. The ball of light turned into a stream of light, and flew out of the mysterious Heaven-Time Light Paradise. The ball of light suddenly spread out, and turned into an extremely huge spirit pattern. The pattern looked simple, but it was also very strange. It was difficult to identify and understand what it meant. However, the moment the image appeared, the expressions of the Great Sage and the Enchantress changed slightly. They immediately recalled some unpleasant memories from the depths of their memories. Zhu Yan's expression also changed slightly. He turned to look at the Great Sage and said, "Is it the same power and aura as the seal?" He'd always been accustomed to running amok, and he'd successfully ascended to the last day's realm. In his opinion, there were truly too few things in this world that could arouse reverence in him. However, at this moment, looking at the huge spirit pattern above his head. An extremely ominous feeling arose in Zhu Yan's heart. His intuition told him that the farther away from the pattern, the better. Back when Lin Feng went to the infinite wilderness to look for Golden Cicada, he'd used the Heaven Interception Seal to deal with the Kunlun Dragon King, causing the Kunlun Dragon King to suffer a great loss. This had also left a deep impression on the other great demons who'd been watching at that time. After returning to the Spirit Abyss Mountain, the great sage had specially emphasized this to all the experts of the ape race, telling everyone, including Zhu Yan, to be vigilant. In the desolate ancient star ocean, Lin Feng hadn't used the Heaven Interception Seal, but at that time, the great sage had actually been secretly vigilant. Zhu Yan might not have cared about other things, but after seeing the traces of light and shadow that the great sage had copied using demonic power, he naturally had a deep fear of the Heaven Interception Seal. Although he hadn't been there to see it with his own eyes, at this moment, he was immediately vigilant as he tried to figure out the power contained in the huge spirit pattern above his head. Yes, it's exactly the same, and the power and aura are exactly the same as that seal. The great sage was also livid. And it's even more troublesome. That seal can only deal with one target at a time, but this pattern seems to cover the whole world. Everything under its radiance will be affected. The light on the spirit pattern shone, forming an extremely thick and wide special realm, as if separating the main peak of the Spirit Abyss Mountain below the pattern from the vast thousand domains of the infinite wilderness. In the area covered by the light, an extremely mysterious power burst out, causing the great sage, Zhu Yan, and the enchantress above to feel extremely uncomfortable. His demon soul and his true form seemed to be separated by this strange power that suddenly arrived. At this moment, the three great demons of the Age of Cultivation Decline felt as if they were about to lose control of their true forms. It's the same as when Tian Longquan was. The enchantress's heart also sank slightly. Her body, which seemed to be blurry under the fog, began to become even more blurred, faintly discernible. The cultivation of the demon race was completely different from that of the human race. The cultivation of the demon race was in line with the heavens, seeking to merge with heaven and earth, drawing heaven and earth into one's body, and finally replacing heaven and earth. They were heaven and earth were them. Whether it was the omnipotent sage, the enchantress sage, or the Zhuyan sage, their connection with heaven and earth had reached an extremely profound level. When they were at their peak, it would be difficult to sever the connection between them and the vast thousand domains, as well as the connection between their demon souls and their true bodies. But at this moment, under the cover of the huge rune light, the three great demons of the Age of Cultivation Decline felt as if their bodies no longer belonged to them. That rune was the upgraded version of the Sky Interception Seal that Lin Feng had obtained in the past. It could be used on a large area, with multiple targets. Although it was similar to the Sky Interception Seal in terms of individual strength, it could cover a large area, and any target within this area would be affected by the power of the seal. Lin Feng came out of the dark heaven timelight cave, and stood at the top of Yujing Mountain, looking down at the main peak of the Divine Abyss Mountain range. He gently put his palms together, and the huge Yujing Mountain fell down, pressing on the Divine Abyss Mountain range. The great sage let out an unwilling roar, and tens of thousands of demon monkeys on the Divine Abyss Mountain roared at the sky together. An endless demonic aura soared into the sky. The demonic aura and light gradually formed the shape of an extremely huge ape between heaven and earth. It was even bigger than the great sage, who had revealed his true form. The void where the ape appeared was distorted, and it stood at the foot of Yujing Mountain. It raised its palms and forcibly pushed against Yujing Mountain. Large amounts of white light flickered on the giant ape's body, and the powerful force made it impossible for Lin Feng to continue descending. The great sage and great sage Zhu Yan looked angrily at Lin Feng above. The great sage roared, and the giant ape formed by the demonic power of the Divine Abyss Mountain clawed at the rune formed by the Sky Interception Seal. However, this claw directly missed, as if it was passing through the air and flowing water. It streaked across the pattern, and no matter how the giant claw stirred, although the pattern was shattered like a reflection in water, it immediately returned to its original state in the next moment. The great sage's heart sank. I can't touch it. The effect of the seal took effect immediately. Even if the great sage and the other demons left the area covered by the seal, the effect would still continue. Different from the original sky interception seal, which disappeared immediately after taking effect, the effect of the sky interception seal depended on the duration of the strange rune itself. Lin Feng looked down at the divine abyss mountain and said calmly, as expected of the ancestral land of the primordial demonic ape clan. Back then, it was managed by Jihuang Xinyuan for a long time. If it hadn't been destroyed by Yuhuang Celestial Sea once, it would have been even stronger than it is now. Under the protection of the demonic power of the divine abyss mountain, although the strength of the great sage and great sage Zhu Yan was affected, they managed to forcibly stabilize their souls. Their undying demon souls and true bodies did not really separate. But the hearts of the two great demon leaders of the ape clan sank to the bottom. They could clearly feel that once they left the boundary of the divine abyss mountain, the power of the sky interception seal would immediately take effect. Before they removed the effect of the sky interception seal, their undying demon souls and true bodies would be directly separated, and their magical powers and demonic powers would be greatly reduced. Even if they left the divine abyss mountain, they would be limited. Perhaps only a few people could match them, but it would be difficult for them to affect the overall situation. Even at this moment, if they dared to follow Lin Feng and leave the divine abyss mountain range, Lin Feng would suddenly attack them, and they might directly die on the spot. The strange rune formed by the sky interception seal could not be destroyed, so the two great demon apes could only stay in the area of the divine abyss mountain range and patiently wait for the effect of the sky interception seal to end. Only then would they have enough confidence to go out. What made the two great demons annoyed was that no one knew when the power of the sky interception seal would be exhausted. And compared to the great sage and great sage Zhu Yan, who at least had the protection of the divine abyss mountain range, the enchantress was undoubtedly in a greater crisis at this moment. At this moment, she was really shocked to the point that her undying demon soul and true body were separated from each other, and her true body fell into a state of loss of control. In the 12 sacred heavens' wonderful flower formation, a mass of dark clouds kept rolling, and a vague shadow could be seen in it. At the same time, there was a flash of brilliance. Being restrained by the sky interception seal, not only was the enchantress's true body sealed, but even her other magical powers and demonic powers were also affected, and her strength decreased. In the dark clouds, there seemed to be spots of starlight shining, and the brilliance kept flashing. The power of the 12 sacred heavens' wonderful flower formation was also activated to the extreme. However, the yin and yang life and death formation under the command of Ding of Shenzhou suddenly unfolded, turning into light curtains that wrapped around the 12 sacred heavens' wonderful flower formation, preventing it from escaping. The great sage's face was livid. Although he was currently trapped in the divine abyss mountain because of the sky interception seal, as long as he did not leave the divine abyss mountain, his strength would be affected, but he could still activate the power of the divine abyss mountain to launch an attack. Whether it was out of anger or out of consideration of being in the same boat, the great sage had to activate the demonic power of the divine abyss mountain and attack Lin Feng at this moment. On the side, great sage Zhu Yan looked equally irritable. As his 4 feet trampled, the void distorted violently, generating a majestic force like a vortex. This vortex fell into the palm of the giant ape formed by the demonic power of the divine abyss mountain, and the giant ape reached out to grab Yujing Mountain. However, Lin Feng was already prepared. The light curtains formed by the yin and yang life and death formation under the control of Ding of Shenzhou suddenly reversed between heaven and earth, and came under Yujing Mountain, suppressing the giant ape's palm together with Yujing Mountain. The 12 sacred heavens' wonderful flower formation in the sky suddenly broke free and immediately manifested the light shadows of the primordial celestial dragon, chaos, golden-winged rock, and divine monkey. They turned into the time and space wheel formation, protecting the enchantress to leave. However, Lin Feng himself gently tapped the tip of his foot on the top of Yujing Mountain, and in the next moment, he was already in front of the demon formation. Then, with the momentum of splitting the sky, a fierce sky-destroying sword Qi rose up and slashed at the 12 sacred heavens' wonderful flower formation. Chapter 1194. Lin Feng's ferocious heaven-punishing sword chi slashed at the 12 sacred heavens array. The huge demon array's brilliance flowed and resisted the sword. The heavenly enchantment great saint was currently in an extremely disadvantageous situation. At this time, she also had no intention of continuing to fight with Lin Feng. Instead, she activated the 12 sacred heavens wonderful flower formation and transformed it into the time and space wheel wonderful flower formation, intending to retreat. But suddenly, a chaotic and hazy brilliance appeared on Lin Feng's left hand and spread to the surroundings. Everything became hazy and unclear, as if there was only a dim grayish-white left. His eyes were as calm as water, like the flowing river of time. That chaotic and hazy radiance was precisely the celestial pole light. Being swept up by Lin Feng's celestial pole light, the miraculous wheel of time and space's circulation also became sluggish, abruptly pausing in the void. Wherever the hazy brilliance reached, everything between heaven and earth seemed to fall into stillness. It was like a painting. Although it was lifelike, there was no vitality and it looked unreal. Only the time and space wheel wondrous formation still continued to operate, wanting to break free from this radiance. The demon formation similarly contained a powerful and profound concept of time. Even though it was disturbed by Lin Feng's celestial extremity cosmic light, it was still functioning. But Lin Feng's body immediately shone with 7 colored halos, and then spread along the celestial extremity light to the time and space wheel array. Covered by the 7 colored halos, the operation of the time and space wheel array became even more difficult. It was firmly attracted by Lin Feng's magic power, and could not escape. It was the Xianmen heavenly escape technique, which contained a variety of concepts of power. It was mysterious and unfathomable, and even the demon array became unstable. The enchantress's strength was greatly damaged, but at this critical moment, she still pulled herself together. Her low and hoarse voice resounded between heaven and earth. The syllables were strange, and it was not human language. Spectacular collapsing Tao-destroying formation. The wonderful wheel of time and space array in the void suddenly changed. The huge light pillar split again into 12 light pillars. The primordial celestial dragon, golden-winged rock, golden-winged divine monkey, and chaos were the brightest 4 light pillars, while the one where golden-winged rock was dimmed. Replacing it was another pillar of light. Within it was a strange-looking exotic beast. It wasn't very big, only about 10 to 20 feet long. From afar it looked similar to a dog. However, upon closer inspection, one would discover that this strange beast had horns like a deer, head like a camel, ears like a cat, eyes like a prawn, mouth like a donkey, hair like a lion, neck like a snake, abdomen like a crab, scales like a carp, front claws like an eagle, and back claws like a tiger. It arched its waist and raised its buttocks, looking majestic and imposing. Its front legs were upright, and its hind legs were spread apart. It was a Ho, a pure-blooded true Ho, also known as the sky-gazing Ho. The light pillars of perfected Ho, primordial sky dragon, extreme agility divine monkey, and chaos became extremely blinding. The other 8 light pillars gradually vanished, while the 4 light pillars fused back into one, forming an extremely thick light pillar. The concept of power contained within it was completely different from the wonderful wheel of time and space array. Lin Feng could clearly sense the mysterious power that could collapse the heavenly apparatus and destroy all Daos. Wherever the light pillar reached, it seemed to be able to destroy all Daos and destroy all Daos. Be it the primordial sky dragon, extreme agility divine monkey, or chaos, apart from the power of time and space, all of them also contain the concept of power that could destroy all Daos. As for perfected Ho's innate supernatural power, it could seal the birth of chaos and destroy the principles of creation. The powers of these 4 major demon clans had already combined together, instantly forming a seemingly ordinary but extremely terrifying power. The wonderful wheel of time and space array instantly turned into the wonderful wheel of time and destruction array. Immediately, the radiance of the celestial pole cosmic light and the mystic gate heavenly escape that were wrapped around the array were also shaken. The colorful halos produced by the mystic gate heavenly escape flickered continuously, maintaining the celestial pole cosmic light from disintegrating. However, the wonderful wheel of time and space array had given the enchantress a chance to catch his breath. and it immediately turned back into the wonderful wheel of time and space array before escaping and leaving this place. Lin Feng's expression did not change, but his eyes shone brightly. Do you think it's that easy to leave? A Tai Chi pattern appeared on his forehead. Yin and Yang fused and rotated continuously. In the depths of his return to void Dharma body, a true spirit divine pattern shone brightly. Lin Feng put his palms together, and the Yin and Yang returning to origin mystical realm was unleashed, instantly enveloping the demon formation. The enchantress immediately sensed the problem. This mystical realm of his seems to be able to return all things to their origin. It's actually faintly restraining the changes of the wonderful wheel of time and space array. Tian Mei had seen this technique in the vast infinite land back then, and she had already vaguely sensed it. Now that she had personally experienced it, her previous conjecture was instantly verified. However, her previous conjecture was correct, and this was undoubtedly bad news for the enchantress. The wonderful wheel of time and space array was obstructed by the Yin and Yang returning to origin mystical realm, and the wonderful wheel of time and space array circulation became sluggish again. Lin Feng then jabbed his finger forward, and a blurry yet terrifying heaven-punishing sword chi instantly flew out, slicing off a portion of the wonderful wheel of time and space array's radiance. The enchantress was left with no choice, and it was difficult for him to escape immediately. Thus, the wonderful wheel of time and space array could only turn back into the wonderful wheel of time and space array to resist Lin Feng's Yin and Yang returning to origin mystical realm. This spell formation had been operated by the enchantress for many years, and he had collected all kinds of precious materials. It had already reached an extremely profound level. Even though the enchantress was currently in a poor state, and was unable to activate the spell formation with his full strength, it still displayed astonishing might. It's much stronger than the current 9 light sky-shattering formation with limited materials. Lin Feng smiled slightly, and his movements were not slow at all. He raised his right hand, and his index and middle fingers stood side by side like a sword. At the tip of his finger, the terrifying sword light formed by the heaven-punishing sword chi was condensed, and rays of black light began to spread in all directions. A thick blood-red pillar of chi soared into the sky, tearing open the sky above, and piercing through the void. Thousands of black light swords revolved around it, and hundreds of millions of complicated formation patterns gradually took shape. Black light flickered, and it turned into a giant ominous sword formation. It was the heaven-punishing sword formation formed by Lin Feng's own magic power. As he waved his hand, under the guidance of this ominous formation, the whole world seemed to have turned into a giant ominous sword, and it slashed towards the wonderful wheel of time and space array. Wherever the sword's edge reached, it seemed as if everything would come to an end, and everything would turn into nothingness. In front of it, everything would be destroyed, and everything would come to an end. Everything would come to an end, and everything would return to nirvana. That seemed to be a power of destruction that was even darker and more profound than the wonderful wheel of time and space array. In front of the enchantress, the whole vast thousand worlds seemed to have turned into a blood-red sword edge, and it slashed towards her and the wonderful wheel of time and space array. What was even more terrifying was that at the edge of the blood-red sword edge, a layer of black and white divine light of creation emerged. For a moment, in the midst of the soaring killing intent, there seemed to be the chanting of celestials and Buddhas, causing the power of the sword to become even more violent, and it slashed through the giant light pillar formed by the demon formation like a hot knife through butter. The wonderful wheel of time and space array that could cause the ritual to collapse and destroy all laws and Taos was broken by another kind of power of destruction at this moment. At the center of the formation, in a vast mass of dark clouds, there seemed to be an ignorant shadow floating silently, and around this shadow, there were rays of light constantly flowing. These rays of light suddenly stopped and converged into a light shadow. This light shadow let out strange syllables, and a strange wave of mana also came out from it. Lin Feng raised his eyebrows slightly. He knew that it was the demon soul of the enchantress. Due to the limitation of the heaven interception sealed boundary, the demon soul of this great demon was separated from his true form. His true form was completely out of control, and the power of the demon soul was also affected. His demon soul could still use his demon power, just like the Kunlun Dragon King back then. In order to deal with the Heaven Interception seal that was branded on his front right claw, the Kunlun Dragon King executed the method of cutting off one's wrist and attacked the right claw of his true form together with the Jade Sky Dragon King. However, the current situation of the enchantress was different. Previously, when he was illuminated by the light of the Heaven Interception sealed boundary, his true form was completely affected. If he wanted to cut off his wrist, he would have to destroy his entire body. But if that happened, it would be meaningless. If the demon race completely lost their true form, they could still survive, and they could even possess other physical bodies, but there was little hope for them to continue to improve. At the same time, even if they possessed other physical bodies, even if they were of the same race, they would still be far inferior to their true form. However, the next scene slightly surprised Lin Feng. The light shadow formed by the demon soul of the enchantress gradually became still, and the other shadow in the dark clouds, which seemed to be unconscious and unmoving, began to shake violently, and the extent of the shaking became more and more obvious. Lin Feng naturally recognized that it was the true form of the enchantress. But looking at the situation in front of him, the enchantress actually wanted to destroy his own physical body. The dark clouds exploded with a loud bang. Boundless chi, blood, and majestic demonic power completely exploded at this moment. The true form of a great demon of the Age of Decline suddenly exploded at this moment, and all the power contained in it exploded in an instant. Even the great sage and Zhu Yan, who were on the Divine Abyss mountain range, were dumbfounded when they saw this scene, and their hearts were filled with horror. The higher the realm, the stronger and sturdier the true form is. Not to mention that the enchantress has already reached the Age of Decline. Even demons who have gone through tribulations or have merged with their star souls would find it difficult to control the explosion of their true form. Lin Feng's eyes flickered when he saw this scene. Unless the true form has already suffered great damage, but in that case, even if it explodes, it can't be so powerful. How did she do it? Could it be? Lin Feng's eyes gradually narrowed. This is actually one of her race magical powers. The explosion of the true form of a great demon of the Age of Decline instantly set off a violent power that really had the momentum to sweep the world. Whether it was Lin Feng or the great sage and Zhu Yan on the Divine Abyss mountain below, they could all feel that at this moment, the entire infinite wilderness seemed to be shaking. Lin Feng's eyes turned cold as he stared at the enchantress. You would rather give up your true form than keep the Gate of Star Ocean. Chapter 1195. To a greater demon at the last day's realm. The former was more important than the latter in the end when comparing his true form and a Star Ocean door. Whether it was the Great Sage, the Golden Rock Great Sage, or the White Tiger Great Sage, they might not be able to make their true forms explode on their own initiative without suffering serious damage. But even if they had the ability to do so, most of them would rather give up the Star Sea Gate in order to preserve their true forms. Therefore, in Lin Feng's eyes, the enchantress's actions at this moment were undoubtedly extremely abnormal. Unless... Lin Feng's eyes flickered slightly. Unless there is a way to reconstruct their true forms. Otherwise, which great demon in the Dharma-ending realm would dare to do this? But even if the enchantress was extraordinarily talented, and could do what others could not, reconstructing her true forms was definitely not an easy task for her at her current realm. The self-destruction of her true forms would also greatly damage her vitality, and she would not be able to recover for a long time. With her current actions, even if she could successfully escape, she was destined to be unable to stir up trouble in the upcoming war between the two realms. She could only find a place to cultivate and recuperate. Generally speaking, when a great demon in the Dharma-ending realm was at its peak, it was impossible to self-destruct. But if the true forms of a great demon in the Dharma-ending realm at their peak really self-destructed, the terrifying power that erupted in that instant could destroy heaven and earth, and was far more terrifying than the collapse of a medium-class world. The true forms of every great demon in the Dharma-ending realm were closely connected to the vast thousand domains. Once they collapsed, the vast thousand domains would be affected. At this moment, the enchantress's true forms were destroyed, causing the void around the Spirit Abyss mountain to shatter together. except for the areas covered by the radiation of the Spirit Abyss Mountain and Yujing Mountain. Everything else in the world was constantly shattering, and then turning into nothingness. The earth was completely annihilated, but it did not become a bottomless abyss, nor was it a deep ravine. Instead, it completely returned to nothingness, as if it was a piece of chaos. The blue sky above their heads also disappeared, bit by bit, and then completely turned into a dark void. In almost an instant, the Spirit Abyss Mountain Range and Yujing Mountain were like two huge islands floating in outer space. Above and below them, there was only chaos and nothingness. The horizon also disappeared. As space distorted, the vast world around the Spirit Abyss Mountain seemed to be annihilated along with the Enchantress's true body. Under the turbulence of time and space, Spirit Abyss Mountain and Jade Capital Mountain seemed to have completely left Tianhuang mainland. Only a black stream of light extended out from the bottom of the Spirit Abyss Mountain. It was hard to see in the void as it extended into the distance. Beyond the endless void in the distance, one could vaguely sense the domain power of the Great Thousand World. This black stream of light was the connection between the Spirit Abyss Mountain and the vast thousand domains. After all, it was the ancestral land of the primordial demonic ape race, the demon race's divine mountain that Jihuang Xinyuan had once managed in the past. But even so, this terrifying power was still shocking. The Great Sage and Zhuyan Great Saint could feel that the area where the Spirit Abyss Mountain used to be on Tianhuang mainland was now filled with domain cracks. The violent and chaotic domain power was constantly wreaking havoc. And it was also constantly repairing the wounds of the vast thousand domains. And in front of them, the Enchantress's true body exploded, stirring up a wild storm that was constantly shattering the void. New changes were born in the chaos, but they were instantly destroyed by the storm. Then they were created again, and destroyed again. It was a non-stop cycle, and space could not be stabilized at all. Through the explosion of the demon power turbulence and the layers of void, Lin Feng seemed to be able to see the Enchantress's star-like eyes. Silently, the two looked at each other. Although there was some regret in the Enchantress's eyes, there was no shame or anger. Other than disappointment, there was more calmness. Keeping the gate of Star Sea, but exploding your true body. Does this mean that you're preparing more hope for the future? And now you're taking the initiative to retreat, indicating that you won't participate in this war between the two worlds? Seeing this, Lin Feng laughed softly. You've indeed surprised me, but things may not develop as you wish. Lin Feng let out a clear howl toward the sky. In the depths of his void return body, the true spirit divine vein flickered, forming a strange and huge force that caused the surrounding dark void to crack open. At this moment, all the stars in the universe seemed to be shaken by this strange and huge force. The orbit of the stars that had been flowing endlessly since ancient times changed at this moment. This power that caused the entire starry sky to shake, even the slightest change, was a shocking and boundless power. And this boundless power was affected by Lin Feng's magic power, and it was reflected back to him. The creation divine light on Lin Feng's body shone. An endless black and white splendor surged forth, spreading toward the surroundings like waves. The void above the entire Jade Capital Mountain seemed to be completely enveloped in a sea of black and white light. Within this black and white sea, countless rays of light flickered incessantly, and the void was filled with brilliant characters and diagrams. They were branded into the void, and then gradually disappeared. But the shocking and grand aura of power became more and more intense. At this moment, in the endless dark void, there seemed to be faintly discernible ribbons of light. The ultimate truths of the great Tao seemed to be condensing into a physical form, shaking the heavens and the earth. Lin Feng stood in the void, and the creation divine light surged around his body. He used the heaven and earth reversal technique, and the majestic power forcefully blocked the violent airflow that seemed to engulf the Enchantress's true body from exploding. This shocking scene fell into the eyes of the great sage and Zhuyan, and it sent chills down their spines. Within Lin Feng's eyes, misty splendor flew out from his pupils. These splendor fell into the void, and turned into one Tai Chi diagram after another. Black and white blended together, and yin and yang complemented each other. They spun rapidly in the dark void, shining brightly. In the center of each Tai Chi diagram, There seemed to be a figure sitting upright, both hands forming a seal. Many Tai Chi diagrams, many figures, and many spells stood side by side in the starry sky. Then, together, they struck their palms toward the galaxy of the universe, shouting in unison, "Go!" The trajectories of the billions of stars and galaxies all twisted, and the changes became greater and greater. The majestic power it contained also became more and more powerful, as if the entire boundless universe was shaking and had its own will. At this moment, it gradually opened its eyes and looked down on all living beings. Lin Feng stretched out his left palm, spreading his fingers and stretching them forward, as if he was pushing something away. His cosmos-reversing divine art erupted with power far beyond anything he'd ever unleashed in the past, forcibly blocking the spatial turbulence created by the heavenly enchantress. At the same time, Lin Feng pointed with his right finger, and tiny light spots flew out one after another. They were incomparably small, like grains of dust. A total of 49 grains of dust appeared between heaven and earth. With a loud rumble, they swallowed and spat out huge power. They expanded and turned into endless light, as if they were real worlds. It was Lin Feng's yin and yang dust divine ability. The 49 mustard seeds turned into Mount Sumeru. The yin and yang dust divine ability that used dust to carry heaven and earth expanded together at this moment. Together with the universe reversing divine ability, it locked down the demonic aura that was still crazily wreaking havoc in front of it like a tide beating against a dam. Then Lin Feng raised his right hand high, and the ferocious sword will and sword chi once again turned into the terrifying heaven punishment sword formation. The index and middle fingers of his right hand stood side by side like a sword, and he slashed down at the raging waves. The raging waves of demon aura that were blocked by the heaven and earth reversal technique and the yin and yang dust technique, under the fierce attack of the Tao-destroying sword, also began to be gradually annihilated. The attack of the heaven punishment sword formation was like splitting the sky and the sea. It broke through the raging waves forcefully and slashed toward the demon soul of the enchantress, who was protected by the 12 sacred heavens flower formation. Behind the raging waves, the 12 sacred heavens flower formation was still working, but it was also affected by the self-destruction of the true body of the enchantress, and temporarily became depressed. In the formation, the dark clouds that had been blasted apart were still gathering at this moment, and there were faint shadows floating in the dark clouds. For the enchantress, in addition to losing her true body, the undying demon soul was also damaged by the self-destruction of the true body. At this moment, she was barely activating the 12 sacred heavens flower formation to transform into the time and space reversal technique to escape from this place, but Lin Feng had already broken through the thistles and thorns, and once again attacked in front of her. Lin Feng stared at the time and space reversal technique, and the light in his eyes suddenly changed, turning into the extreme cosmic light. His gaze was like the long river of time, and it fell on the time and space reversal technique. Being engulfed by the light, the time and space reversal technique immediately paused, and the terrifying attack of the heaven punishment sword formation had already cut on the demon formation. Immediately, the broken light flew all over the sky. The shadow and the dark clouds let out a soft sigh. Master of the celestial sect of wonders, good move. Did you always hold back in the past? Or did your strength improve by leaps and bounds in such a short period of time? As the enchantress sighed, a strange door suddenly appeared in the dark clouds. The door opened, and light and shadow flashed inside the door, shining with starlight, as if it led to the melodious, desolate, ancient sea of stars. It was the Star Sea Gate that the enchantress controlled. Although Lin Feng controlled 3 Star Sea Gates, and the demon clan was destined to be unable to open the Star Tomb, it was still a great opportunity and capital for the demon clan to be able to enter the Star Sea to cultivate at any time. The enchantress destroyed her true form, and kept the Star Sea Gate. On one hand, it was because she was talented, and on the other hand, the Star Sea Gate was really important for the demon clan's cultivation. Over the years, the enchantress had gathered a large number of demon clan experts, and her strength had been growing, and the Star Sea Gate had helped her a lot. Not long ago, she had witnessed the Golden Rock Sage take the initiative to drop the Star Sea Gate that he controlled, and thus seek to escape from Lin Feng. She did not expect that it would be her turn so soon. Thinking back to the time when Lin Feng's Dharma went to the Spirit Abyss Mountain, the original purpose was to attract her and the Golden Rock Sage to appear, and then seize their Star Sea Gate. But at this moment, the enchantress could only sigh helplessly, and also took the initiative to drop her Star Sea Gate. Under the enchantress's control, a large amount of starlight gushed out of the huge gate, but it did not attack Lin Feng, but wrapped around the Star Sea Gate itself, and the gate gradually became illusory. A powerful force spread out, helping the time and space will magic array to shake off Lin Feng's celestial pole cosmic light. And then the time and space will magic array immediately operated to the extreme, turning into a pillar of light that connected to the sky, sweeping up the enchantress and disappearing into the void. Lin Feng's expression was calm, and he opened his right palm, and the illusory gate condensed back into a solid body, falling into his palm. This was the fourth Star Sea Gate that Lin Feng controlled. Chapter 1196. While Lin Feng and the enchantress were fighting, the demonic power of the divine abyss mountain below surged wildly. Although the Great Sage and Zhu Yan Great Saint were affected by the sky-severing sealed boundary, they still had powerful combat power as long as they didn't leave the divine abyss mountain. They naturally didn't want the enchantress to die at Lin Feng's hands. The death of the enchantress would not benefit them at all. The giant ape formed by the demonic power of the divine abyss mountain let out a deep roar that spread far away in the void. It was shocking. The giant ape's hands were even gradually lifting up Yujing Mountain. Seeing this, Lin Feng pointed lightly with his fingers. 49 yin and yang motes fell down. It was as if 49 mustard seed worlds were supporting Yujing Mountain at the same time. As he stabilized Yujing Mountain and the yin and yang life and death formation, Lin Feng looked up at the void. There, the wonderful wheel of time and space formation turned into a pillar of light that broke through the space-time and swept up the enchantress's demonic soul. At this moment, it had already disappeared, and only the last trace could be seen. Lin Feng's eyes flickered slightly. If my previous guess is correct, she decided to give up the present, plot for the future, and withdraw from this war between the two realms. Is it because she has sensed something? No, it shouldn't be. Otherwise, she wouldn't have reacted like this. Maybe it's just an intuition. If that's the case, things are likely to be as I guessed before. Shaking his head, Lin Feng didn't continue to think about it. Instead, he put away the Star Sea Gate in his hand. After refining this Star Sea Gate, Lin Feng had almost gained control of more than half of the Star Sea. Although he couldn't control the power of the Star Sea, the resources in the Star Sea were almost at his and Xianmen Tianzong's disposal. Even the Gate of Star of the Heavenly Charm Great Sage has been seized. The number of gates of star that Lin Feng now has reached 4. There was a total of 6 Star Sea Gates. Obtaining one of them would allow one to enter and exit the desolate ancient Star Sea. But if one person controlled more Star Sea Gates, the meaning would be completely different. With 3 Starry Sea Gates gathered, they could forcefully close the other Starry Sea Gate. If all 4 Starry Sea Gates were gathered, they would be able to freely open the Star Graveyard and harvest star remains from within. Previously, Lin Feng had obtained 3 Star Sea Gates from the White Tiger Sage, the Omnipotent Sage and the Golden Rock Sage. Apart from being able to close other people's gates, it also meant that no one else could open the Star Tomb without him. And right now Lin Feng himself controls 4 Star Sea Gates, which means that he can open the Star Tomb at will. Even though after the last time the Star Tomb needed a longer time to nurture large amounts of star remains, but for Lin Feng, the initiative was already completely in his hands. On the Spirit Abyss Mountain, the Omnipotent Sage and Zhu Yan Great Sage stared at the Star Sea Gate in Lin Feng's hand, their eyes full of envy. The Great Sage's eyes were full of resentment. In the desolate ancient Star Sea, it was Lin Feng who took the Star Sea Gate that belonged to the primordial demon ape clan. Lin Feng had cut off the primordial demon ape clan's access to the desolate ancient Star Sea. The impact was huge. The Great Sage's prestige in the primordial demon ape clan was seriously damaged. If he had not been strong enough and had a strong foundation, his position as clan leader might have been shaken. In the past few years, the Great Sage had been looking for the Enchantress and Golden Rock Saint. He wanted the Star Sea Gate in their hands. But because the Enchantress and Golden Rock Saint had been in seclusion most of the time before the war between the two realms, he had not found anything. The Enchantress's Star Sea Gate was right in front of him, but he could only look at it. He could not get it. What made him even more depressed was that the new owner of the Star Sea Gate was Lin Feng. And it just so happened that he was currently trapped by the sky-severing sealed realm. Even if he wanted to throw caution to the wind and have a great battle with Lin Feng, he also did not have the strength to do so. Possessing the Spirit Abyss Mountain ancestral land, he could only protect himself. As if sensing the great sage's anger, Lin Feng looked down at the Spirit Abyss Mountain and shook his head with a smile. The Enchantress's self-destruction of his true form caused an extremely violent turbulence. But because it was instantaneous, it lasted for a short period of time. Although the demonic power and spiritual chi were still chaotic, it was not as violent as before. The Spirit Abyss Mountain, under the influence of the black light, gradually began to distort time and space, merging back into the vast thousand domains of Infinite Mainland. At this moment, the affected areas of Infinite Mainland were still chaotic and barren. There were broken rifts everywhere, as if a corner of the entire vast thousand domains had been torn apart. But with the return of the Spirit Abyss Mountain, all the chaos began to be controlled again. The densely packed rifts began to heal at an accelerated rate, gradually restoring the original scene of the Bright Sky Road. But it was only the world that had been stabilized. The destroyed creatures and the broken mountains could not be restored. There was only a scene of desolation. Lin Feng looked at the gradually falling Spirit Abyss Mountain and chuckled. He landed on Yujing Mountain again. The yin and yang life and death array, together with Ding of Shenzhou, turned into a small light spot and returned to Lin Feng's glabella. The branches and leaves of the mysterious sky treasure tree on the towering immortal mountain swayed and trembled. It broke through the void and the huge white jade immortal mountain gradually disappeared. The omnipotent sage and the great saint of Zhuyan defended the Spirit Abyss Mountain to the death, and did not come out. If Lin Feng wanted to forcefully attack, not to mention whether or not he could break through, the time would not be short. And now the overall situation of the war between the two worlds was changing rapidly. He could not continue to tangle with these two great ape demons here. And under the effect of the heaven interception boundary, the two of them could not think of continuing to cause trouble while Lin Feng was away for a short period of time. The Great Sage and Zhu Yan Great Sage watched the figure of Lin Feng leaving with Yujing Mountain. They were expressionless and livid, but there was nothing they could do. If they left the protection of the Spirit Abyss Mountain, their demon souls and true bodies would immediately be separated, and their strength would be greatly reduced. They could only wait patiently. Let's see how long this heaven interception boundary of yours can trap me. The Great Sage clenched his teeth, and sharp and huge fangs emerged from his mouth. He was like an active volcano that could erupt at any time. Zhu Yan Great Sage, who was beside him, was also depressed and filled with anger. He had thought that the return of Yudu would definitely force Lin Feng to return, and he would be able to leave Spirit Abyss Mountain without any scruples to find trouble with Mount Shu, who knew that he would still be trapped in Spirit Abyss Mountain, and unable to go out. Leaving behind the two depressed great demons of the ape race, Lin Feng drove Yujing Mountain, and moved through the void, returning to the world of the human race in the divine land. His expression was calm. In front of him floated 4 huge gates in the void, and faint starlight flickered above the gates. At the beginning of the war between the two worlds, Lin Feng's initial strategic goal was to find a way to take the Gate of the Sea of Stars from the hands of the Golden Rock Great Sage and the Enchantress. Until today, this initial goal had been achieved. But until now, strange changes had occurred one after another, making it difficult for Lin Feng to relax. If one were to say that the birth of the future star constellation Glazed Buddha Lord wasn't something to be concerned about at the moment, the sudden changes in the Great Void Temple in the Mysterious Sea, and the Yudu clan's return to the world of the living were undoubtedly urgent matters at hand. On the way back to the Divine Land, bad news came one after another. First, after the Yudu race reappeared in the vast land of Infinite Wasteland, they immediately went to the base of the Taishu Temple in this world of the demon race, Taiwa Mountain. After careful consideration, the elder of the Taishu Temple, Venerable Xianyi, who was stationed at Taihua Mountain, finally chose to give up on Taihua Mountain. All the cultivators of the Taishu Temple returned to White Cloud Mountain. The difference in defense power between these two places was huge. Although it was a pity to give up Taihua Mountain, Venerable Xianyi still made a quick decision. White Cloud Mountain and Taihua Mountain were directly connected by a realm passage. Under the leadership of Venerable Xianyi, the Taishu Temple used their last resort to forcibly annihilate this small realm passage. Since the war between the two worlds, the blessed land of Taihua Mountain, which had been occupied by the Taishu Temple, was completely destroyed. But whether it was Lin Feng or the others, no one had any objections to this. Although Venerable Xianyi's choice seemed weak and made him lose his prestige, it was actually the most rational decision at the moment. It was a good idea to defend against the enemy outside the country's gates, but they had to have enough power to support it. With most of the strong practitioners of the Taishu Temple and the Haotian Mirror entering the mysterious sea and unable to come out, the Taishu Temple had no choice but to avoid the sharp edge of the Yudu clan. At the same time, the Taishu Temple also sent valuable information. Other than the new clan master of the Yudu clan, 12 fantasy sons, there were at least 2 great Yudu demons in the last day's realm accompanying them. With such a formation, even if Venerable Xianyi defended White Cloud Mountain, he would still be under heavy pressure, let alone facing the enemy at Taihua Mountain. After the Taishu Temple took the initiative to give up Taihua Mountain and retreat to the Divine Land, the strong practitioners of the Yudu clan also went straight for the Divine Land. Along the way, other than the humans who happened to be in their way being easily killed, the Yudu clan didn't care about the other human cultivators who were fighting and couldn't dodge in time. After entering the Divine Land, their target was where the mountain gate of the Taishu Temple was, White Cloud Mountain. The Yudu clan had returned, and the Taishu Temple had lost Taihua Mountain. However, from the looks of it, there weren't too many casualties. The other piece of news was truly a nightmare. Kuan Dragon King and Jade Sky Dragon King led a group of strong practitioners of the dragon race out of the mysterious sea and blocked the Great Qin dynasty in Heaven Wasteland. Even though Zhu Yi and Sword Venerable Heavenly Dipper of Mount Shu came to their aid, Qin Emperor Stone Feather still died on the spot. Even the immortal dragon city was lost in the void. The Great Qin dynasty's retreat from the war between the two worlds was already a foregone conclusion. However, in comparison there were still some exchanges. Zhu Yi and Sword Venerable Heavenly Dipper withstood the pressure from Kuan Dragon King and killed Jade Sky Dragon King. Their names shook heaven origin, and this made Lin Feng feel happy for his disciple. The opposition between the known and the unknown. Xiaoyi has indeed walked out of his path of 2 rights. Lin Feng sat on Jade Capital Mountain with his eyes closed. The scripture of heavenly Tao virtue circulated as though it was one with the great Tao of heaven. He felt the feedback from the Tao. It's different from my path of 2 rights, and it's also different from Little Lin's path of defying fate and fate. However, it's equally exciting. Good. Very good. While Lin Feng was pleased, the sudden change in the Great Qin dynasty made him frown. Not mentioning the death of Stone Feather, even the immortal dragon city is lost. In this case, the situation in the Divine Land will probably change. Chapter 1197. In the past, Zhu Yi had established his Tao with the principles of light and darkness. As he continued to cultivate and understand the Tao of heaven and earth, new changes occurred. Light turned into light, darkness turned into obscurity, and darkness changed to deduce the principles of heaven and earth. Light referred to things that were clear, visible, and could be understood. Obscurity referred to things that were obscure, invisible, incomprehensible, and unperceivable. The combination of the two was actually the opposition and unity between the known and the unknown, the visible and the invisible. Even with the development of the cultivation world, there were still countless things that were unknown. There was no end to learning. In the process of continuous exploration and learning, people would turn the unknown into the known. They would use various methods to sense the things and principles that they could not understand in the past, and grasp the things and principles that they could not grasp in the past. This was the process of the Tao of Tao constantly advancing. The unknown was understood as the known, and the known extended to even more unknowns. The two were endless and contained everything that was known and unknown. This Tao of yin and yang was the path and direction of Zhu Yi's cultivation in the future. At this moment, he had successfully cleared the fog in front of him and officially stepped onto this path. He had successfully taken his first step. If he continued to move forward with his head held high, his future would be limitless. Compared to Zhu Yi's achievement of killing the Blue Sky Dragon King under the pressure of the Kuan Dragon King and the mysterious sea receiving ritual, Lin Feng was more happy and comforted about his understanding of the Tao. However, while comforting his disciple, Lin Feng also sighed about the Great Qin dynasty's misfortune. In a sense, the death of Emperor Qin Stonefeather and the loss of the immortal Dragon City were very unnecessary. It was a result that was completely unexpected and made people feel helpless at the same time. Shi Xingyun was actually the reincarnation of the remnant soul of the primordial heavenly dragon gene. This was also out of Lin Feng's expectations. Stonefeather sacrificed it to the immortal Dragon City, but a huge accident happened because Shi Xingyun had yet to form an essence soul. This was something that no one, including Stonefeather himself, had expected. Zhu Yi had comprehended his Tao of yin and yang, and a new mystique under the pressure of the Kuan Dragon King and the other dragon race experts. There was no room for tricks. If Sword Sovereign Astral Dipper had arrived a moment earlier, the Qin Emperor Stonefeather would not have been forced to carry out the dragon soul sacrifice in advance, resulting in the subsequent accidents. But in reality, Sword Venerable Tiangong's participation in the battle was outside of everyone's plans. No matter who it was, no one could blame Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper. Otherwise, it would be an unreasonable act of anger. However, for the cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty, who were under heavy pressure, some of the younger generation might not be able to think so calmly. Even Zhu Yi's breakthrough in the midst of battle, and his efforts to turn the tide might be perceived by some as him deliberately holding back his strength and harboring unfathomable motives. When one was under great pressure, venting one's anger on others was often the simplest way to relieve the pressure. Although it was completely useless in reality and would even bring more trouble, there would always be people who would never get tired of it. This was human nature. Lin Feng did not care too much. He also felt pity for the Great Qin dynasty's misfortune. In recent years, Lin Feng could vaguely sense that while the relationship between the Great Qin dynasty and his Xianmen Tianzong was still very friendly, the higher-ups of the Great Qin dynasty, led by the Qin Emperor Stonefeather, probably had very complicated feelings. On one hand, the relationship between the two had always been friendly and close. On the other hand, Xianmen Tianzong's strength, influence were all growing at a shocking and unbelievable speed. To the Great Qin dynasty, how to position their relationship with Xianmen Tianzong had become an increasingly important problem. At the same time, it also gave them a headache. When it came to the position of the Qin Emperor Stonefeather and the Great Qin dynasty, Lin Feng would be the first to not believe that they were willing to be under someone else. If the Qin Emperor Stonefeather was willing to be under someone else, it would have been impossible for him to form an alliance with Xianmen Tianzong, the Purple Sky Path, the Northern Militant Royal Court, and even the Great Zhou dynasty, who had always been at odds with him, to resist the arrangements that Taishu Temple had made for the human world of the Divine Land. The Zhou Emperor Liangpan was also a similar person, which was why there was such a thing back then. However, with the Battle of Yingxi and the Battle of Xian extermination, the situation of the Divine Land had been constantly changing, causing the Great Zhou dynasty's position to gradually shift. Perhaps their external styles were different, but in essence, whether it was the Qin Emperor Stonefeather or the Zhou Emperor Liangpan, they were the same person. Back then, the Qin Emperor Stonefeather had resolutely joined the alliance to resist the arrangements of Taishu Temple. As Xianmen Tianzong continued to grow stronger, his opinion of Xianmen Tianzong became more and more complicated. This was something to be expected. Improving the Great Qin dynasty's strength had always been the goal of the Qin Emperor Stonefeather and the experts of the Great Qin dynasty. Opportunities had to be fought for by themselves, and at the same time, opportunities were often accompanied by danger. This required the decision-makers to devise strategies themselves. The war between the two worlds undoubtedly contained great danger and opportunity. In the previous war, when the Taishu Temple had entered the Xianhai Sea and Linfeng had been in the Spirit Abyss Mountain, the Great Qin dynasty had been unstoppable in the infinite wilderness continent. Everything seemed to be developing in a good direction, but in the next moment, the situation suddenly took a turn for the worse. Linfeng could roughly guess the thoughts of the Qin Emperor Stonefeather and the others. This was considered human nature. However, in his opinion, the Great Qin dynasty and the Qin Emperor Stonefeather were slightly impatient in the war between the two worlds. Although they were not as bold as the Golden Rock Sage, they were still not as calm as Stonefeather had previously appeared. The cruelty of the war between the two worlds was on full display at this moment. One wrong step could lead to a bottomless abyss. The Great Qin dynasty now had 1 foot over the edge of the cliff. The Qin Emperor Stonefeather had died, the immortal dragon city had been lost, the Dao integration realm expert Shizong Mao had been seriously injured, and the other top experts of the Great Qin dynasty, such as the Anliang monarch Shizong Yue and the Jingfang monarch Shilin, had also died in battle. The power of the Great Qin dynasty had been reduced by more than half compared to before the war. The only top expert left was the Nanming King Shizongtang, who had stayed behind to guard West Hill City. The Qin Emperor Stonefeather had died, and his son, the crown prince of the Great Qin dynasty, Shi Chongyan, was only at the later stages of the Yuanying realm. He had yet to form his primordial spirit. If it was during normal times, he might still be able to do something, but now that the war between the two worlds was happening, it was destined that he would not be able to take on such a big responsibility. It was hard to predict what the Great Qin dynasty would do next. Although Zhu Yi and Sword Venerable Tiangang guarded the realm passage in the southern wasteland together and blocked Shen Dragon King who had replaced Kuan Dragon King, the crisis of the Great Qin dynasty was not completely resolved. The main target of the Yudu race's descent into the Divine Land was the White Cloud Mountain, but the other powers of the human race could not be careless either. Under such circumstances, what would the Great Zhou dynasty do next would be something that people would be very concerned about. Launching an attack on the Great Qin dynasty during the war between the two worlds to take advantage of the situation was something that the Great Zhou dynasty might not do. However, if they really had such thoughts, there were other, gentler methods that they could think of. That was the qi of the dragon vein of all living beings in the Divine Land. During the war between the two worlds 4,000 years ago, the Great Zhou dynasty had yet to rise up, and was just a small country at the border of the Great Qin dynasty. At that time, the Great Qin dynasty controlled most of the secular territory of the Divine Land, and gathered the qi of the dragon vein of the entire Divine Land in West Hill City. They displayed great power during the war. After the war between the two worlds, the Great Qin dynasty fell into a low while the Great Zhou dynasty gradually rose up. When it reached the generation of the Zhou Emperor Liang Pan, the momentum of the Great Zhou dynasty's rise was completely unleashed. They became a powerful dynasty that was on equal footing with the Great Qin dynasty. There was a period of time when their national power was even above the Great Qin dynasty. During this process, the Tianjing city and the Great Zhou dynasty forcefully split the qi of the dragon vein that was originally flowing towards West Hill City and the Great Qin dynasty. In the recent years, as the west wind suppressed the east wind again, the Great Zhou dynasty retreated, and the Great Qin dynasty regained the upper hand. The Great Qin dynasty had always been trying to take back the qi of the dragon vein that ruled over all living beings in the divine continent. Now the Great Qin dynasty naturally could not continue with its previous plans. However, as the west wind declined and the east wind rose again, it was likely that the Great Zhou dynasty would be thinking about the Great Qin dynasty. The Great Qin dynasty had lost both the Qin Emperor Shi Yu and the immortal dragon city. Even though they could choose a new emperor to inherit the qi of the dragon vein, it would still take time for them to completely control the qi of the dragon vein. Moreover, from a completely neutral point of view, after losing the immortal dragon city, the person with the highest cultivation in the Great Qin dynasty was Nanming King Shizongtang, who was at the same Dao integration realm as the Qin Emperor Shi Yu. However, the effect of his control over the qi of the dragon vein was evidently inferior to that of the Zhou Emperor Liang Pan, who had the Grand Imperial Palace. This was under the situation where the Zhou Emperor Liang Pan and the Grand Imperial Palace alone held the qi of the dragon vein. If the qi of the dragon vein was gathered together, the power would naturally be even greater. Today, when Yudu descended on the divine land, the entire divine land was facing a massive crisis. However, danger and opportunity always existed together. To the Zhou Emperor Liang Pan, while facing danger, there was undoubtedly a massive opportunity. The environment of the war between the two worlds would restrict the internal conflicts between the strong powers of the human race, but it could also become the most suitable excuse. They would say that it was an emergency and they were borrowing it temporarily, but the result was that they would never return it. The only good news for the current Great Qin dynasty was that even though they had participated in the war between the two worlds, they didn't have a huge grudge with the Yudu race. More accurately speaking, the Great Qin dynasty had suffered heavy losses under the hands of the Dragon race and Yudu race, which led to their decline. In recent years, before the war between the two worlds, they gradually showed signs of revival. Speaking of grudges, it should be the Great Qin dynasty that hated the Yudu race. However, at this moment, they definitely wouldn't provoke the Yudu race. On the contrary, even though the Great Qin dynasty was in an abnormally weak state, the Yudu race's main target was still White Cloud Mountain. Lin Feng sat on Jade Capital Mountain. As he flew through the air, he kept thinking about the current situation. Chapter 1198. At the moment, the atmosphere in the Great Qin dynasty's capital, West Hill City, was rather peaceful. The news of Emperor Qin Shiyu's death and the Great Qin dynasty's expedition to Infinite Wasteland was tightly sealed. However, in West Hill City, within the palace, there was a gloomy atmosphere. There was a deathly silence, and the atmosphere was extremely oppressive. Although the Great Qin dynasty displayed extremely strong control at this moment, preventing the internal situation from falling into chaos, there was still a sense of panic within the palace. In the main hall of the palace, there were a few people sitting face to face. Beside them were some magic power projections. They were the magic power projections of the Great Qin dynasty's top experts who had important tasks and could not attend personally. They had come to participate in this important meeting for the Great Qin dynasty. Whether it was the real person or the magic power projection, everyone's gaze would always sweep across the empty dragon throne in the main hall and sigh to themselves. A primordial soul transformation realm elder of the royal family stroked his beard and said softly, "Let's act according to His Majesty's will." Before he left. Although Emperor Qin Shiryu had died, he had personally led the army in the war between the two worlds. Even with the immortal dragon city, Shiryu might not be able to guarantee his safety. Although it was inauspicious, everyone in the Great Qin dynasty, including Shiryu himself, had to make all sorts of contingency plans out of responsibility. This naturally included all sorts of plans for the worse. For example, if Emperor Qin Shiryu died, or if the immortal dragon city was damaged or even destroyed. Of course, there was also the worst possibility if both Emperor Qin Shiryu and the immortal dragon city were lost. This also involved whether the external situation would ease or become tense after Emperor Qin Shiryu died, and whether the overall situation of the war between the two worlds was critical for the Great Qin dynasty. The current situation was undoubtedly the worst outcome. Under such circumstances, the person who could shoulder the heavy burden of the Great Qin dynasty was undoubtedly not the supervising crown prince Shi Chongyun, who was only at the later stage of yuanying. Of the Great Qin dynasty's three Dao integration experts, Emperor Qin Shiryu had died, and monarch Ruyang Shizongmao was seriously injured. Now the strongest person was Nanming monarch Shizongtong, who had been guarding West Hill City. With Shen Dragon King being blocked by Zhu Yi and Sword Venerable Tiangang, and with the Yudu race not descending on the Divine Land, Great Qin's situation was not too dangerous. In such a situation, perhaps some people would suggest that Shizongtong temporarily act as regent to support Great Qin. But now that Yudu race had descended, even though their main target was Taishu Temple, the other powers, including Great Qin dynasty, had no choice but to raise their guard and prepare for battle. In order to gather the dragon vein qi, Shi Chongyun had to ascend to the throne. The current situation did not allow Shi Chongyun to ascend to the throne, and in order to gather all of the Great Qin dynasty's power and defend against external enemies, the only choice was the South Bright monarch, Shizongtong. In the posthumous edict left by the Great Qin Emperor, Stonefeather, it was also clearly stated that under special circumstances, the Southern Bright Monarch, Shizongtong, would automatically be promoted to Imperial Uncle and become the first successor of the Great Qin. There was no need to exploit any loopholes in language. At this moment, no one would deny that the current situation was undoubtedly the special situation that Stonefeather had spoken of. Perhaps the only person who was disappointed was Shi Chongyan. However, as the only cultivator below the primordial spirit realm, he remained expressionless and silent. The Southern Bright Monarch, Shizongtong, sat at the head of the crowd. He did not look at the dragon throne on the stairs, and he was also silent, as if he was thinking about something. Opposite him was a magic power projection from the Great Qin dynasty's other Dao integration realm expert, the Rogan Sun Monarch, Shizongmao. However, Shizongmao's current state was very poor. Even though it was just a magic power projection, people could see that he was very weak. This was a very rare thing for the Rogan Sun Monarch, who had always been tough. Shizongmao coughed dryly and said slowly, "For now, the Great Qin dynasty can only withdraw its defenses and not start a war with anyone. Let's get through the war between the two worlds first." A Great Qin elder beside him sighed and said, "His Majesty and the immortal Dragon City have fallen together, and the Great Qin dynasty has fallen into its weakest moment in thousands of years. The accumulation from the last war between the two worlds is almost all used up. Even if we get through this war, the situation will change. Where should the Great Qin dynasty go?" After a slight hesitation, the elder said softly, "Could it be that the only way is to really side with Xianmen Tianzong?" The Great Qin dynasty's higher-ups and experts present fell silent. The Great Qin dynasty had been having a headache in recent years about how to get along with the ally that was growing stronger and stronger, to the point that they were gradually unable to catch up to. Now this problem seemed to have been easily solved. However, this method of solving it made Great Qin feel quite unhappy. However, at this moment, it seemed that they had no other choice. If we don't side with Xianmen Tianzong, are we supposed to side with the Great Zhou dynasty? A middle-aged man opposite to the elder curled his lips and said, "Although we are indeed unwilling, Xianmen Tianzong has not interfered with our internal affairs for now, nor does he have any intention of controlling us. The Northern Militant Royal Court is the same as the Great Qin dynasty. They are both factions that are very involved in the world, but Xianmen Tianzong has no intention of controlling them." The middle-aged man snorted and said, "Right now the enemy we should be most wary of is the Great Zhou dynasty. Although there is a war between the two worlds right now, who knows if Emperor Liang Pan of Zhou will take the risk out of desperation. After all, for the Great Zhou dynasty, this is the best time to swallow up the Great Qin dynasty." Everyone present nodded. The Great Zhou dynasty had always been the enemy they were most wary of. Even if they had been lying low in recent years, Emperor Liang Pan's ambition could not be underestimated. At this moment, an elder suddenly looked at Monarch Gongyang, Shizongmao, and asked, "Monarch Gongyang, you said before that there seemed to be a lot of doubts about His Majesty's battle." Shizongmao's expression was solemn. This old man only heard a simple description from Sword Venerable Big Dipper. His Majesty's death and the loss of immortal Dragon City were mainly due to an accident during the Dragon Soul sacrifice, causing the situation to slide into an uncontrollable abyss. Sword Venerable Big Dipper arrived a bit late, causing His Majesty to have to take the risk. However, this cannot be blamed on Sword Venerable Big Dipper. It is just that Zhu Yi of Xianmen Tianzong's strength has clearly changed before and after the battle. Before and after His Majesty's death, this Xianmen Tianzong elder Zhu's strength was not the same, but he did not refine his spirit to return to the void and break through to the next realm. Shizongmao took a deep breath. Although divine abilities and magic power cannot be excluded, and there is a possibility of a breakthrough in the aspect of magic power, the difference between before and after is worth paying attention to. All the cultivators of Great Qin fell silent. At this moment, Shizongtong, who was sitting on the seat of honor, clapped his hands lightly, and everyone looked at him. Shizongtong said silently, "Whether there is something fishy or not, our most reliable ally is still Xianmen Tianzong. The Yudu race has descended on the divine land, and the main force of Taishu Temple and the Haotian Mirror are trapped in the Xianhai, unable to return. It can even be said that everyone in the Divine Land, including Dao Venerable Xian Yi of White Cloud Mountain, is counting on the master of Xian Men's true body to return from Tianhuang vast land. Only then will the human cultivation world have enough confidence to fight Yudu. An accident happened to Taishu Temple in the Xianhai, and their mountain gate has become the most likely target of the Yudu race's attack. After this war between the two worlds, Taishu Temple is likely to be heavily damaged. Although it is hard to predict whether Xianmen Tianzong will be a blessing or a curse, from the looks of it, their future is obviously better than Taishu Temple's. The Great Zhou Empire has been getting closer and closer to Taishu Temple, so Xianmen Tianzong is ultimately our most reliable choice. Everyone present, including King Rajanyang Shizong Mao, nodded in unison. One of them suddenly turned to look at Shizongtong and Shizong Mao, wanting to say something but hesitating. Shizongtong, however, seemed to know what he was thinking. Silently he said, "Even so, we are not suitable to welcome Shi Tianhao as the emperor." That person saw that Shizongtong had already made it clear, so he simply said, "Since we have already decided to side with Xianmen Tianzong, why don't we be more thorough and place a bigger bet? If the great Qin emperor can't rise in the divine prefecture and become a supreme existence, and if Xianmen Tianzong can really sweep through the world in the future, we will strive to become the strongest power under their rule." Celestial Venerable Huang is one of the 4 heroes under the master of Xianmen. If he becomes Celestial Emperor Huang of the Great Qin Dynasty, our Great Qin Dynasty will work hard to occupy the strongest corner of the territory under Xianmen Tianzong in the future. That person's voice was slightly solemn. Otherwise, even if we completely side with Xianmen Tianzong, our future development will still be unpredictable. Putting aside the fact that the northern militant imperial court has been advancing by leaps and bounds, Celestial Venerable Huang's big brother Xiao Yan's wife is a descendant of the ancient emperor's bloodline. Although it was not widely spread, and the ancient immortals world was sufficiently secretive, the news of Lin Feng bringing Xiao Yan to the ancient immortals world to propose marriage still leaked out. The Great Qin Dynasty was naturally the first to pay attention to this matter. Shi Zongtong shook his head. Putting aside the fact that Shi Tianhao will definitely not accept the matter of succession, even if we can accept a branch bloodline as emperor, and can accept a direct disciple of Xianmen Tianzong as emperor, Shi Tianhao's sense of belonging to Xianmen Tianzong is far stronger than to the Shi family, let alone our Great Qin Dynasty. Although it is a bit hard to say, he actually has no feelings or sense of belonging to our Great Qin. In the entire country, the person he is closest to in the royal family is Xing Yun. Hearing this, the higher-ups of the Great Qin Dynasty revealed a regretful expression, and did not mention the previous suggestion. At the side, Shizong Mao said in a low voice, "Let's try our best to survive the calamity of the war between the two worlds first. We need some time for the people to accept the news of the former emperor's death, appoint a new emperor, and gather the dragon vein energy again. All of these must be done as soon as possible." He looked at Shizongtong. In this special period, the coronation ceremony can only be simple. To avoid chaos, we can't invite other people to attend the ceremony. Of course. Shizongtong nodded, stood up, and walked to the center of the hall. Looking at the high dragon throne, he slowly said, "Inform Xianmen Tianzong and the other powers that are on good terms with the Great Qin Dynasty. We should also start preparing." In the hall, Rosen Monarch Shizong Mao's projection was the first to stand up. After a moment of silence, he slowly bowed to Shizongtong. Chapter 1199. As Shizong Mao, who was also at the Dao integration realm like Shizongtong, bowed, the other higher-ups of Great Qin also stood up and did the same. Shi Chongyan did not say anything. In the end, he also stood up and bowed to Shizongtong. That day, the Great Qin Empire announced to its people that Shi Yu had passed away, and that a new emperor had succeeded the throne. Even though the Great Qin Empire's dragon vein qi was still gathered in Shilling City, it could not help but fall into chaos. Red, yellow, green, white, and black dragons of light rose up from the Great Qin Empire's territories and passed through the void, gathering towards the Great Qin Empire's capital, Shilin City. These dragons of light seemed to be formless, and even many cultivators could not see their bodies. However, they could faintly feel the restlessness within them. Within this restlessness, there was also a deep majesty, as if it was the will of the heavens that was worshipped by all beings. The Great Qin Empire's subjects had already been recruited when the war between the two worlds had just begun. Now that these subjects had heard of the Qin Emperor's death, they could not help but fall into panic. Even though a new emperor had succeeded the throne, it would still take time to calm the people's hearts. The Great Qin Empire naturally wanted to keep the news under wraps, and it had the ability to do so. However, in order to receive the dragon vein qi, it could only announce the news. Everyone knew that a new war between the two worlds had arrived. Before the war had ended, news of the previous emperor's death had spread. The Great Qin Empire's subjects naturally had many speculations, and their hearts became more and more unsettled. Before the Great Qin Empire faced a new round of external crisis, it first had to deal with the internal turmoil. Fortunately, this was something that the Great Qin Empire had planned for in the worst-case scenario, so it was carried out in an orderly manner. However, the current external situation attracted the Great Qin Empire's attention. The Great Qin Empire was truly in a precarious situation, and the consequences were unimaginable. After discussing with Shizongmao and the others, the new Emperor Shizongtang finally made an important decision to invite the cultivators of Xianmen Tianzong to Shilin City. After the battle with Great Sage Zhu Jian, Wang Lin had successfully killed Great Sage Zhu Jian, but he had also been heavily injured. Zhu Yi and Sword Sovereign Big Dipper guarded the southern wasteland realm passageway and confronted the dragon race's Shen Dragon King, while Xiaoyan guarded the northern foothills of Xianmen Tianzong. However, there was also good news. Shi Tianhao and the rest who had stayed in Infinite Wasteland finally returned to the Divine Prefecture. Under Zhu Yi's guidance, they returned through the southern wasteland domain passage. Other than his junior sister Luo Qinggu, there was also Xianmen Tianzong's guest elder Dao Venerable Blazing Sun, Zhuge Zhuge, and Great Demon Great Sage Lu Yuan, who was in the realm of star and soul as one. What made the Great Qin Empire at ease was that Shi Tianhao and Luo Qinggu were the personal disciples of Lin Feng. After they arrived at Shilin City, anyone who wanted to invade Shilin City would have to consider the attitude of Xian Gate's master Lin Feng. However, while Shi Tianhao, Luo Qinggu, and the others were still on the way, something even more influential attracted the attention of the Great Qin Empire and all the human powers in the Divine Land. They had to pay attention to it. The Yudu race had descended on White Cloud Mountain. The divine mountain that used to be shrouded in white clouds was now silent. In the void above the mountain peak, a large amount of light flashed in the space. Boundless purple light spread out and dyed the surrounding boundless worlds purple. Boundless runes were inscribed in the void, causing the entire world to distort. The fog around White Cloud Mountain dispersed under the shine of the purple light, and a gentle white light shone. It was as though rings of light were rippling in heaven and earth. They shrouded White Cloud Mountain and resonated with the purple light. A handsome youth that looked to be in his 20s appeared on the peak of White Cloud Mountain. He looked at the crack in the void above his head calmly. Beside him stood the current monastery master of Taishu Temple, Yin Nanlai. Behind them were the three grand elders of Taishu Temple. Other than Dao Venerable Qingning and Fu Yunкong, there was another person who looked like a child but had incomparably aged eyes. He was the radical elder of Taishu Temple, Kuang Heng. Beside Kuang Heng, Dao Venerable Qingning, and Fu Yunкong stood a youth in green. He was Yin Nanlai's disciple Lin Daohan. The cultivators of Taishu Temple all raised their heads to look at the huge crack in the void. In the crack, figures that resembled humans but had triangles on their heads and sharp fangs that resembled dragons and wolves stepped out one after another. These powerful beings all had long silvery white fur on their backs. A huge tail trailed behind them, and the surface of their skin was covered in purple runes. They were the former ruler of Heaven Wasteland, the Yudu race. The strongest Yudu beast in the lead stood upright like a human. It had a medium build and a calm gaze. Silently, it looked down at White Cloud Mountain. It was the current clan master of the Yudu race, the 12 phantom sons of Yudu. He didn't purposely restrain his power, Nor did he purposely reveal his presence. He just stood there calmly, as though he was the center of heaven and earth. However, at this moment, there seemed to be an invisible pressure pressing down on White Cloud Mountain, causing the rippling rings of light around it to distort. Dao Venerable Xianyi and Yin Nanlai frowned slightly, their gazes grave. Yin Nanlai looked at Dao Venerable Xianyi. Senior Uncle Xianyi, this Yudu seems to have experienced more than one calamity. Slowly, Dao Venerable Xianyi nodded his head. Indeed, more than one. Now that I think about it, during the Battle of the Spirit Sea, this Yudu was probably experiencing a calamity, and was in its weakest state. Or perhaps there were other reasons why it didn't make a move. Yin Nanlai looked at the strong practitioners of the Yudu race walking out from the crack behind Phantom Sun Yudu. His expression was grave. In the previous battle, after Yudu of the Heavenly Sea fell, the Yudu race went into hiding. Even though many Yudu beasts were killed, their foundation back then was simply too strong. After cultivating for so long, they still have many strong practitioners. Phantom Sun Yudu looked down at White Cloud Mountain calmly. Behind him, there were two tall Yudu beasts that stood upright like humans. Silently, they were also examining the mountain gate of their number one enemy back then. Behind them were three tall Yudu beasts. Their gazes were fixed on White Cloud Mountain below them. Their gazes were filled with eagerness, overbearing, and full of aggression. Behind these three Yudu beasts were the other Yudu beasts. They stood together and surveyed the surroundings, scanning the heaven and earth of the divine land. Dao Venerable Xianyi, Yin Nanlai, and the rest looked at these strong practitioners of Yudu, and their gazes narrowed. Words were already meaningless. Both sides could only fight. Dao Venerable Xianyi said solemnly, "Formation." Other than Yin Nanlai, Kuang Heng, the young Dao Venerable, Fu Yinkong, and Lin Daohan all disappeared from the peak of White Cloud Mountain. At the same time, 8 rays of light rushed into the sky. These 8 rays of light combined with the magic power of Kuang Heng, Lin Daohan, and instantly formed a huge formation in the sky above White Cloud Mountain. In the formation, black and white clouds swirled and intertwined continuously, giving birth to endless changes. On top of the black and white whirlpool, there were rays of golden light flashing. The golden light wasn't dazzling, but it gave people a feeling of infinite majesty. It seemed incomparably ethereal, difficult to touch, and difficult to reach. At this moment, a pair of eyes seemed to appear in the sky above White Cloud Mountain. One black and one white, one yin and one yang. It was simple, but it displayed the essence of the great Tao of heaven and earth. However, there seemed to be no emotion in this pair of eyes. It was like the supreme heavenly Tao, sitting and watching the vicissitudes of life. It wasn't heartless, but it treated everyone equally. This gaze seemed to be everywhere, passing through time and space. Everything in the world was contained in this gaze, and it couldn't be blocked or avoided. The figures of 2 elders appeared beside Dao Venerable Xianyi. One of them had a seemingly transparent ancient bell above his head, and the other had a huge drum above his head. They were the primordial spirits of the void Yin-Yang bell, and the supreme formation-breaking drum. Yin-Yang Wang and Taigu Immortal. Thank you, elders. As soon as Dao Venerable Xianyi finished speaking, Yin-Yang Wang and Taigu Immortal nodded solemnly and disappeared. The void Yin-Yang bell and the supreme formation-breaking drum immediately changed on the peak of White Cloud Mountain. The folded space was fully unfolded. An endless golden light kept flashing. Clouds surged rapidly, and an incomparably magnificent golden palace rose from the ground. It was so huge that it couldn't be any bigger. The chanting of countless deities and Buddhas could be heard coming from the palace, as if a holy kingdom had descended on the peak of White Cloud Mountain. This was the creation treasure, the Taishu Temple. Dao Venerable Xianyi sat cross-legged on the peak of White Cloud Mountain, one hand forming a seal, the other pointing at the ground of the peak. Light flashed around him, and the entire White Cloud Immortal Mountain emitted a dazzling light at this moment. Gradually, White Cloud Mountain disappeared, and so did Dao Venerable Xianyi. As the endless light flowed, the entire White Cloud Mountain seemed to have turned into a huge and illusory ball of light. Within the ball of light, 9 layers of illusions could be vaguely seen, and each layer was higher than the previous one. Pleasant celestial music lingered in the air, as if all the deities in the heavens were chanting the laws of the great Tao together. From the first layer of the light door, to the second layer of the starry sky, to the third layer of the spatial rift, all the way up. The fourth layer was a vast world that looked like a huge palm that covered all four directions. The fifth layer was a layer of clouds filled with golden lightning bolts. The sixth layer was a huge celestial city in the sky. The seventh layer was a colorful halo that looked like the fusion of 6 layers of worlds. And the eighth layer was a mysterious celestial realm filled with celestial music. It was to the extent that up to the 9th level, nothing tangible could be seen. There was a profound radiance that was not resplendent, not dazzling, not grand, not shocking, but indescribable, indescribable, indescribable and incomprehensible. It was the 9 heavens of the Great Void Palace. At this moment, the entire White Cloud Mountain seemed to have turned into the 9 heavens of the Great Void Palace. The creation treasure, Taishu Temple, suddenly opened up at this moment, turning into a mysterious celestial realm that was similar to the 8th layer of the 9 heavens of the Great Void Palace. It completely merged with the 8th layer of the 9 heavens of the Great Void Palace that was formed by the fusion of Tao Venerable Xian Yi and White Cloud Mountain. Yan Nanlai raised his left hand, and the Taishu seal on the back of his left hand shone with an indescribable light. It was the Taishu mystic light. The light enveloped Yan Nanlai's body and lifted him up, bringing him into the 9th layer of the 9 heavens of the Great Void Palace together with the endless mysterious light. Chapter 1200. Above the Divine Land, there was a large amount of light spreading out. The entire Great Teen world seemed to be covered in a hazy light fog. The attention of all the experts in the human world of cultivation was attracted to the direction of White Cloud Mountain. That was where the #1 holy land of the human race had been since the ancient era of the Divine Land, and its name had spread throughout the ages. No matter what their opinion of that place was, everyone acknowledged that it possessed great power that had been passed down to this day. Now that White Cloud Mountain had unleashed its power, it indeed shook the void for thousands of miles. Those who knew the inside story all knew that most of the main forces of the Taishu Temple were still in the mysterious sea. Currently, White Cloud Mountain, from the perspective of the Taishu Temple itself, was actually very empty. Even so, the great power that it displayed deeply moved all the human powers in the Divine Land. The huge formation above White Cloud Mountain was the protective formation of the Taishu Temple, the great formation of Yin-Yang Void. Within the huge formation, black and white air currents spiraled continuously. Within it, 12 balls of light could be faintly seen. They were like the 12 stars in the void of the universe, shining brightly. In the vast heaven and earth, there seemed to be 12 faintly discernible streams of light that stretched out from the great formation of Yin-Yang Void in all directions, connecting with the entire Divine Land. The streams of light flickered as if the Divine Land had its own life and was slowly pulsing. Large amounts of spiritual qi passed through the 12 streams of light and gathered in the formation. As the formation operated, a pair of eyes seemed to be looking at the entire Great Thousand World. The Great Void 9 Heavens Imperial Court, which was transformed from White Cloud Mountain, was shrouded by the great formation of Yin-Yang Void. It spun in the void and disappeared from the Divine Land, entering the boundless void. In the void, there seemed to be an unprecedentedly bright star hanging at the top of the Great Thousand World, looking down on all life. One of the 2 tall Yuda beasts behind Mirage Sun Yuda said slowly, "Chief, just leave it to us. Everything changes in an instant. Time waits for no man." Mirage Sun Yuda shook his head. "The feud between our race and the Taishu Temple doesn't exist in an unfair fight." As he spoke, his aura suddenly surged. In the blink of an eye, the space around the Divine Land where White Cloud Mountain originally stood was completely shattered and turned into nothingness. The boundaries of the vast 1,000 domains above his head seemed to break apart as well. The void was annihilated into primal chaos. Everything ceased to exist, leaving only the lone bright star. Sun Mirage Yudu had a calm expression, and his body rose up. He stretched out his palm towards that huge lump of light that was like a star. A huge palm made of resplendent purple light grabbed out from the sky. It was so huge that it seemed like it was going to grab the huge ball of light formed by the Great Void Nine Heavens Imperial Court. The Great Void Yin-Yang formation rotated, and a series of golden beams of light crashed down. Each beam of golden light was powerful enough to slay a Dao integration stage human cultivator, or a Star Soul integration stage demon beast. Although these beams of golden light descended one after another, they formed a line in the void. It was like a huge blade that could split open the sky, and it wanted to shatter the huge hand of purple light. However, the palm of purple light grabbed the sky and grabbed the huge blade. As the golden light flickered, it was as though countless sharp blades were shooting through the void. Just the remnant golden light that scattered out was enough to slice open cracks in the void. However, no matter how fierce the golden light was, it couldn't break through the huge palm formed by the purple light. In the Great Void Yin-Yang formation, 12 balls of light shone together, and black and white air currents intertwined and spun continuously. There seemed to be no end to the power that was continuously supplied to the huge blade. At the same time, the gaze in the formation suddenly lit up, as though it had materialized and landed on Mirage Sun Yuta's body. There seemed to be a mysterious and marvelous power in the void that was suppressing Mirage Sun Yuta's demonic power. The 12 beams of light that stretched out from the Great Void Yin-Yang formation became clearer and clearer. They were like 12 ropes that were pulling something as they suppressed towards Mirage Sun Yuta. Mirage Sun Yuta's expression didn't change. On the surface of the huge palm formed by the purple light, large amounts of black light markings suddenly appeared, and were engraved on the purple light palm. The mournful wail of the great Tao seemed to ring out in heaven and earth, and a violent feeling of power spread out from Mirage Sun Yuta's hand. The huge golden blade that was pinched by him actually started to shatter continuously. It was as though the boundless void and heaven were suppressing the power on Mirage Sun Yuta's body, and at that moment, a large amount of it started to rebound. This great demon of Yuta's palm gradually pulled back, and it actually shook the Great Void Yin-Yang formation, as though it wanted to pull the huge formation back towards itself. Not only the formation, even the void that was pulled by the 12 beams of light that stretched out from the formation of the same generation, seemed to be pulled by Mirage Sun Yuta. Below the Great Void Yin-Yang formation, the Great Void Nine Heavens Imperial Court that looked like a huge lump of light flashed, and a large amount of light rushed out from within. It transformed into a huge wave that surged towards Mirage Sun Yuta. The radiance that filled the air instantly drowned out Mirage Sun Yuta along with that purple light palm. The huge purple light palm gradually crumbled under the radiance that was like the sea tide. Meanwhile, Mirage Sun Yuta himself was also trapped by the radiance. However, in this radiance, Mirage Sun Yuta's expression was calm as though he was taking a stroll. Large amounts of purple light flashed on his body, and the surface of the purple light was engraved with black inscriptions that looked as though they were corporeal. Under the impact of the sea tide-like radiance, these purple radiance and black light markings were also dissolving in large amounts. Mirage Sun Yuta raised his claw and swung it in the air. A miserable scar instantly appeared in the void, and with the power of splitting the sea, he forcefully split the radiance tide in front of him. At that moment, in the Great Void Yin-Yang formation, there was another beam of divine light that shot straight at him. Wherever that beam of divine light passed by, the void was instantly annihilated. At the borders of the divine light, there were countless chaotic storms that spread in all directions, destroying even more heaven and earth. And where the aftermath reached, it was clearly not as terrifying as the divine light itself. The targets that were covered by the divine light seemed to be unable to dodge at all. No matter how they dodged, they would be hit by the divine light. Even if they were placed in the boundless illusory world, the boundaries between real and fake would still be wiped out, and they would be killed in an instant. Mirage Sun Yuta raised his eyelids, and two beams of purple light shot out from his eyes as well. They merged into one in the air, and the purple color faded away. Instead, it became a blurry and transparent color. In this blurry and transparent light pillar, there seemed to be large amounts of black patterns swirling and dancing continuously, forming the core of the light pillar together. The transparent light pillar collided with the divine light given off by the Great Void Yin-Yang formation, and the result was that the divine light that was given off by the formation was shattered. But with such a disturbance, The sea of light from the great void nine heavens imperial court became even more majestic. It swept towards Mirage Sun Yudu once again, and it continuously broke the purple light that was protecting his body. This light seemed to be an ocean that was formed by the gathering of boundless great void mysterious light. It filled the surrounding void, and it was boundless. The mysterious light still wasn't dazzling, but at this moment, it seemed to be the only reality, the only existence, the only reason in this world. Wherever the tide passed, only the light remained forever. Everything else turned into nothingness. Even the great demons of Yudu, who had their eyes on the top of their heads, looked at the sea of light and the great void nine heavens imperial court. Their expressions also became solemn. In the great void yin-yang formation, black and white air currents mixed and flowed continuously. They cycled over and over again, and their power seemed to be endless. When a divine light was broken, it didn't seem to be affected at all. Immediately, another beam of divine light shot out. Mirage Sun Yudu was trapped by this light, and he looked at the seemingly boundless sea of light around him, as well as the divine light that was smashing towards his head. However, he shook his head instead. After Tai was injured by Brother Tianhai Emperor, all these years, he still hasn't nurtured a second cultivator of Taishu Temple that can execute the secrets of the heavens? Mirage Sun Yuda's face, which was no different from a human except for numerous purple light markings, actually revealed a faint smile. But that's true. After Wen Qiang, after so many years only Tai has appeared. As he said that, Mirage Sun Yudu suddenly let out a heaven-shaking roar. His roar didn't just shake the void, even the divine land, heaven wasteland, and the entire heaven primordial great world seemed to tremble slightly. The silver-white mane of this great demon of Yudu started to grow thicker and longer. It spread in large amounts, and the purple light markings on the surface of his body were gradually covered by the silver-white hair. At the same time, boundless silver light flickered in the void. The surface of the silver light was plated with a layer of beautiful and enchanting purple radiance. It was as though a purple halo had appeared on the surface of a huge silver ball of light. On the purple halo, there were numerous black light markings that covered the surface of the purple halo. That violent power that shook heaven and earth made the great void nine heavens imperial court seem to lose its splendor at that moment. No matter if it was Dao Venerable Xian Yi and Yin Nanlai in the great void nine heavens imperial court, or Kuang Heng Lin Daohan, and the rest in the great void yin-yang formation, their hearts sank slightly. Mirage Sun Yudu had finally revealed his true form, and the strength of his power was indeed shocking. However, this wasn't what they were most concerned about. No matter if it was Dao Venerable Xian Yi, Yin Nanlai, or Kuang Heng, they had personally fought with strong practitioners of various realms of the Yudu race back then, so they had plenty of experience. They knew very well what the most terrifying part of this race was. In almost an instant, Kuang Heng Lin Daohan, and the rest of the 12 people controlled the great void yin-yang formation to descend. The huge formation completely fused into the great void nine heavens imperial court. The power of the great void nine heavens imperial court also rose wildly because of that. As boundless radiance shone, it was as though it was a kingdom of gods on earth, a celestial realm. However, at that moment, the great void nine heavens imperial court restrained its power instead. Large amounts of profound radiance gathered on itself, forming an all-out defense stance. At that moment, Mirage Sun Yudu's calm voice rang out in the void. Yudu Xianhua. A beam of black light that seemed resplendent and deep appeared. Along with the appearance of this beam of black light, the great Tao of heaven and earth gave off a clear and ear-piercing wail. Beams of brilliance interweaved and flashed in the void before shattering. As though there was no time interval, the moment this beam of black light appeared, it immediately bombarded the great void nine heavens imperial court. Chapter 1201. When the black light landed on the nine heavens of the great void palace, it instantly melted a large amount of the light around the palace like rolling snow. That indescribable profound radiance, upon coming into contact with the black radiance, seemed to suddenly become dazzling, clear and bright. However, it lost the mysterious, invisible, indescribable, and indescribable profound power concept. It was as if it had fallen from the clouds to the mortal world. It looked dazzling and bright, but it was no different from the other light. It was as if it had faded into the crowd and lost its otherworldly nature. The light around the 9 heavens of the great void palace seemed to be undulating like tumbling waves. It was gradually penetrated by the black light. The terrifying black light seemed to be able to destroy everything, and it made people's hearts tremble. It was different from the Yudu dark flower of heavenly sea Yudu in the past. This was the Yudu profound flower of mirage sun Yudu. Although it wasn't as powerful as the Yuhuang heavenly seas, it still shook the 9 heavens and 10 earths. The terrifying power that shook the great Tao of heaven and earth continuously attacked the 9 heavens of the great void palace, as if it wanted to split the celestial realm formed by the white cloud mountain into 2. The other strong practitioners of Yudu who were watching the battle nodded their heads slightly when they saw this sight. The Great Void Temple's all-encompassing Great Void mysterious light is indeed extraordinary. Especially when used to defend, it truly has boundless wondrous uses. If it was someone else, even if their level of power was similar, they would probably be pierced through by Chief's Yudu profound flower. It's just a matter of time. Under Mirage Sun Yudu, one of the 2 strongest Yudu beasts present said indifferently, and the time is very short. And this is under the premise that we don't interfere. The Yudu beast behind him silently said, "Then should we make a move?" Chief said to finish the battle as soon as possible. Although the battle took place in the void outside the boundaries of the vast 1,000 domains, the powerful energy fluctuations still shook the entire human race world of the divine land, and affected the hearts of all the people in the human race cultivation world. On the land of the southern wasteland, a golden rainbow stretched between heaven and earth as if it connected the heavens. It was Zhu Yi's Permitha Golden Bridge. At this moment, there were 3 people standing on the Permitha Golden Bridge. Other than Zhu Yi and Sword Lord Tiangang, there was also a tall young man. This young man was dressed in a purple robe. His figure was tall and well-proportioned, and he was burly but not fat. He was extremely handsome, and his smooth black hair draped over his back. He was Lin Feng's disciple Shi Tianhao. At this moment, Shi Tianhao did not look as casual as he usually did. There was no smile on his face and his eyes were cold. Silently, he stared at the domain passageway that connected the divine land and infinite region in the distance. Even though he couldn't see it nor sense it, Shi Tianhao knew that there was a heavenly dragon that had attained the last day's realm coiled up near the exit on the other side of the passageway, and it was in confrontation with his group on this side of the passageway. Shi Tianhao was silent, but he was like an active volcano that could erupt at any time, making others feel oppressed and ominous. Even though he knew that his opponent was the great demon of the dragon clan, Shen Dragon King, who had attained the last day's realm, Shi Tianhao did not hide his hostility at all. After knowing that Gu Lei and Li Kueyin had died, Shi Tianhao's mood immediately fell to the bottom of the valley. Fortunately, Yu Hongyan had already killed the murderer, Fang's Dragon King. Otherwise, Shi Tianhao's mood would have been even worse. Sword Lord Tiangang turned to look at Shi Tianhao. Just now, when the young man beside him saw the Fang's Dragon King's body that Yu Hongyan had brought back, he had directly swallowed more than half of the Fang's Dragon King's body in front of everyone. Even Sword Lord Tiangang, who had lived for a long time, frowned when he saw that terrifying aura. At that moment, Sword Lord Tiangang felt as though there was a humanoid beast standing in front of him. His strength was shocking, and his potential was even more shocking. Even though he was only at the primordial soul embodiment realm, his divine powers and dermic powers were enough to make the entire great heaven primordial world look at him. Sword Lord Tiangang speculated that even when he was at the Dao integration realm, he would not be a match for Shi Tianhao. This discovery made Sword Lord Tiangang, an expert at the Dharma ending realm, have no choice but to take this young man seriously. Although the other party's cultivation age was not even a fraction of his age, not to mention a fraction of his age, his strength and potential could not be ignored by Sword Lord Tiangang. Even though Shi Tianhao was still not a match for Sword Lord Tiangang, his growth over the years had already indicated that his future was limitless. On the other side, Zhu Yi was the same. In fact, he had already succeeded half a step ahead of Shi Tianhao. During the battle with the Kunlun Dragon King and the Blue Sky Dragon King, Zhu Yi's strength had suddenly increased. Sword Lord Tiangang was not sure if he had been holding back before, but he could not help but pay attention to the strange technique that seemed to be able to see through everything. Zhu Yi glanced at Shi Tianhao and said in a deep voice, Tianlongshan is much more composed than Tianlong Kuan. His state of mind is so calm that he doesn't seem like a dragon. Previously, when you guys came over from the vast land of infinite wilderness, Sword Lord Tiangang and I deliberately waited half a beat to receive you guys. It was such a good opportunity, but he refused to attack. Other opportunities will be even more difficult to find. Although he looked much calmer, Zhu Yi was also furious after knowing the exact news of Gu Lei and Li Kueyin's deaths. Shi Tianhao said, Second senior brother, you and Sword Lord Tiangang have given that dragon quite a bit of pressure by guarding here. Why don't we leave first and rush to White Cloud Mountain? Then we can turn around and attack halfway. If that dragon wants to take the opportunity to attack Great Qin, we can block him head-on. Even if we can't kill him, we can still severely injure him. Although he was in a bad mood, Shi Tianhao did not lose his cool. Given their current strength, there was a limited chance for them to completely kill a primordial heavenly dragon in the Dharma-ending realm. Unless Tianlongshan fought to the death, if he wanted to escape, it would be very difficult to make him stay. If Tianlongshan really stayed to fight to the death, they would have to pay a heavy price to kill him, even if they had the geographical advantage. However, to Zhu Yi and Sword Lord Tiangang, although it was risky, it was a suggestion that was worth considering. The Yudu race had returned to the Divine Land and attacked the White Cloud Mountain of the Taishu Temple. At that moment, White Cloud Mountain was in a relatively empty state, and the situation was very dangerous. Although Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao had already received the news that their master, Lin Feng, had returned from the vast land of infinite wilderness, the situation of the battle was confusing. No one could predict where it would go. To a certain extent, the cultivation world of the human race had lost the opportunity to strike first. If they wanted to turn the situation around, it was undoubtedly not advisable to continue staying the same. In a situation where they were already half a step behind, if they did not do anything, they would only fall further and further behind. Only by taking the initiative to break the situation could they effectively stop their disadvantage and take back the initiative. Zhu Yi and Sword Lord Tiangang were facing off against Shenlong King in the southern wasteland. At the same time, the other party didn't dare to act rashly. It also meant that they were being restrained by Shenlong King. In this situation, Zhu Yi and the rest naturally had to think of a way to change the situation. Previously, when Shi Tianhao and the rest returned from the vast land of infinite wilderness, they had made an attempt, but Shenlong King was very steady and didn't take the bait. Shi Tianhao's intention was to think of a way to lure the enemy deeper in. Unless they get the exact news that we have appeared on the battlefield of White Cloud Mountain and have already fought with the Yudu race, Tianlongshan most likely won't act rashly, Zhu Yi said. Only after the abnormality of a mortal dragon city completely stabilizes will the imprint that second senior brother and Tianlong Kuan left behind be effective. How long will that take? Shi Tianhao transmitted his voice using magic power, and Zhu Yi replied with the same magic power. It won't be stabilized in a short period of time. Shi Tianhao nodded his head and didn't say anything more. He cupped his fists towards Zhu Yi and Sword Lord Tiangang. I'll leave this place to senior brothers. I'll head to West Tomb City now. Zhu Yi and Sword Lord Tiangang nodded their heads in greeting. Zhu Yi said, Be careful on the way, take care of little junior sister, Goldie and Wanqiu. Shi Tianhao replied, Of course. After saying so, he prepared to move, but he suddenly felt the heaven and earth tremble violently. Zhu Yi and Sword Lord Tiangang, who were beside him, also felt the abnormality, and they raised their heads to look at the sky in astonishment. With their eyesight, they could naturally see that the chi of dragon vein in the territory of Great Qin dynasty had condensed into light dragons that shuttled through the sky. However, at this moment, the light dragons condensed by the chi of dragon vein seemed to have gone through a strange change. They seemed chaotic and unstable. The three of them looked down at the ground at the same time. They could clearly feel that the chi of the earth vein in the southern wasteland was originally compatible with the chi of dragon vein. They advanced and retreated together, resonating with each other. However, at this moment it wasn't just the light dragons formed by the chi of dragon vein. Even the flow of the chi of the earth vein in the ground had become unstable. It's not just the chaos of losing control. Someone is forcefully changing it, causing it to fall into a different trajectory. Because it conflicts with the previous trajectory, it seems unstable. Zhu Yi's eyes flashed, and he took a deep breath. At this time, Sword Lord Tiangang and Shi Tianhao didn't need his reminder to immediately understand. It's the Great Zhou dynasty. They're fighting for the chi of dragon vein with Great Qin. At this moment, in the main hall of the Great Qin dynasty's palace in West Tomb City, a group of Great Qin dynasty cultivators were shocked and furious. How did they do it? Shi Zongtang, who had already been enthroned as the new emperor, sat on the dragon throne at the top of the stairs in the main hall, wearing a dragon robe and a crown. He stared at the top of the main hall. Originally, there was an endless amount of dragon vein chi gathered here from the 4 domains, and then it was added to his body. However, at this moment, the chi of dragon vein was flowing in other directions, and was intercepted by someone else. The Grand Imperial Palace. The Grand Imperial Palace has recovered to its peak state. Lord Ruyang Shi Zongmao's expression was grim. However, something like this has never happened before, so we didn't know that the Grand Imperial Palace could have such an effect. When the Grand Imperial Palace was still on the throne, he was the only emperor of the Divine Land, the first human emperor of ancient times. After the Grand Imperial Palace fell, it was also heavily damaged, and until today, it had never recovered to its peak state. As such, no one knew that the Grand Imperial Palace at its peak state could forcibly gather the chi of dragon vein in the entire Divine Land. A Great Qin dynasty elder's expression was slightly sad. The Grand Imperial Palace, the Supreme Grand Imperial Palace. What a great Grand Imperial Palace! On the dragon throne, Shi Zongtang said in a deep voice. After all, the Great Qin dynasty has existed for many years. Even if Liang Pan has the Grand Imperial Palace, we still have a chance to fight back. We can't let him succeed. Chapter 1202. Shi Zongtang did not get up from his throne, but his hands continuously formed seals. 5 colored light gathered together, and turned into a golden Dao fruit. The fruit of the way rose to the top of the palace, and beams of light shot out in all directions. The Great Qin Empire's capital, Shilin City, seemed to have turned into a massive magic formation. Countless talismans and inscriptions were connected together, forming a magic formation that covered the entire city. The light from the magic formation spread out in all directions, as if it was going to cover the entire Great Qin Empire's territory. At the center of this giant magic formation was naturally the Great Qin Imperial Palace. At this moment, within the Great Qin Imperial Palace, there were rays of golden light rising from the ground, as if there were thousands of pillars that connected the heavens and the earth. Within the sky full of golden light, there seemed to be a massive 5-clawed golden dragon dancing in the air. Above the palace, at the center of the giant magic formation, there was a massive disk made up of golden light. It continuously spun, gathering the dragon vein chi from all directions. However, at this moment, the golden disk's rotation seemed to be disrupted, and it continuously tilted and shook. Red, green, yellow, black, and white dragon chi continuously dissipated. The dissipating dragon chi passed through the boundless space and gathered in another direction. As it pulsed, the 5-colored light dragon's appearance gradually changed. It lost its original colors and became purplish gold. The purplish gold light dragon entered the space, and in the deep space, it was as if the heavens had chosen it, gathering the true dragons. In the distant Great Zhou Empire's territory, there was also a large amount of dragon vein chi gathering towards Tianjing City from all directions. The light dragons formed by the Great Zhou dragon vein chi were purplish gold in color. The purplish gold light dragons gathered in Tianjing City. At this moment, there was also a huge formation above Tianjing City that covered the sky. A large amount of dragon chi was gathered in this huge formation. Within Shilin City, Great Qin's emperor and ministers all had serious expressions. Apart from the new emperor Shi Zongtang, All of Great Qin's experts stood up and turned into rays of light as they flew out of the palace and went to the other important buildings within the palace. Under their control, another 9 massive pillars of light shot into the sky from the royal palace, forming a protective formation around the main hall of the royal palace. Together, they strengthened West Hill City's protective formation, helping the new Emperor Shi Zongtang stabilize the Great Qin's dragon vein qi, preventing it from being intercepted by Emperor Liang Pan of Zhou and the First Imperial Palace. Shi Zongtang's expression was solemn. He was the new emperor, and the inheritance of the dragon vein qi had yet to be completed. The former Emperor Shi Yu had personally led an expedition, but he had died in battle in Tianhuang mainland. This had caused a huge impact on the hearts of the people of Great Qin, causing the inheritance of the dragon vein qi to become extremely unstable. If there was enough time, then with the protection formations that West Hill City had built over the generations, unless the Great Zhou dynasty directly attacked West Hill City, Great Qin would be able to safely survive this disaster. However, after the First Imperial Palace was restored, it unexpectedly gathered all of the Divine Land's dragon vein qi, causing the Great Qin dynasty to be in a precarious situation. The Grand Emperor was the last human emperor of the primordial era. He was also the first human emperor of the human race after the heaven primordial world split into the Divine Land and Tianhuang mainland. The Grand Emperor, the creation treasure that he had created, had finally been restored after being heavily damaged, immediately dealing a silent blow to the Great Qin dynasty. Unlike the immortal Dragon City, which protected its own people and the human race, the First Imperial Palace carried the will of the Grand Emperor. It wanted to rule over all living beings, and no one dared to disobey it. It wanted to be the supreme leader of the world, and the only ruler of the era. Even if the Great Qin dynasty did not lose the immortal Dragon City, it would still be at a disadvantage when facing the Great Zhou dynasty, which had the First Imperial Palace. If they had the immortal Dragon City, Shi Zongtang could rely on it to defend and survive the period when he had just ascended to the throne, and the inheritance of the dragon vein qi. However, even though they pushed the West Hill City's formation to its limits, they could only watch as the dragon vein qi continued to leak out. What made Shi Zongtang, Shi Zongmao, and the other Great Qin experts' faces turn ashen was that the Great Qin dynasty's citizens, whom they had recruited and protected, were becoming more and more unstable. As the dragon vein qi was connected, a voice suddenly sounded out in the hearts of the Great Qin citizens. The Great Qin Emperor, Shi Yu, was greedy and blindly conquered the Tianhuang mainland. As a result, he died and Great Qin's soldiers died. He even lost the immortal Dragon City, implicating the citizens and causing them to fall into danger. Great Qin has lost its virtue and suffered this calamity. Today, the demon race has caused chaos and brought disaster to the Divine Land. We are here under the mandate of the heavens to protect our people. It was Emperor Zhou's Liang Pan's voice. His tone was calm but majestic. It was like the morning bell and evening drum, heavily striking everyone's heart. He was clearly the ruler of the Great Zhou dynasty, their mortal enemy. Even though his words were quite ordinary, they seemed to have a strange power that touched the hearts of the commoners of Great Qin, causing them to fall into a daze. Before they could even think about what he was saying, they couldn't help but want to kowtow and submit to his might. The people of Great Qin seemed to be strangely twisted at this moment. That strange power did not have any offensive properties, so the West Hill City's defensive formation could not defend against it. Monarch Zhenyang Shi Zongmao, who had not returned to West Hill City and was still on his way, projected his magic power into the West Hill City Imperial Palace's main hall. When he heard Liang Pan's voice, he could not help but curse. Liang Pan, that traitor! Emperor Zhou Liang Pan was clearly bullying the Great Qin dynasty, because it had lost the immortal Dragon City, and could not defend against the Grand Imperial Palace's strange power. He wanted to take drastic measures and destroy the Great Qin dynasty's foundation. Great Qin's new Emperor Shi Zongtang's expression was dark. As the people of Great Qin became more and more unstable, the Great Qin dynasty's dragon vein qi was being lost faster and faster. The way to resolve this was quite simple. Great Qin would immediately stop gathering its dragon vein qi. That way, If Emperor Liang Pan didn't take down Western Hill City, he wouldn't be able to continue to bewitch people. Even if he tried to take in Great Qin's dragon vein qi from outside, it would be much less effective. However, this way, the Great Qin dynasty, which had already fallen into a crisis, would become even weaker, and the situation would become even more difficult. If the top experts of the Great Devils attacked, it would be difficult to defend, even if they would be instantly annihilated. However, if this continues, we'll just be supporting the enemy for nothing. Most of the dragon vein qi will be taken away by Liang Pan and the Grand Imperial Palace. Shi Zongtang frowned. One wrong step would lead to many more mistakes. In such a dangerous environment, everyone was staring at each other. Once one party made a mistake, the result would be a series of disasters until the offender was consigned to eternal damnation. It would be very difficult for them to catch their breath and turn things around. Just as Shi Zongtang ascended to the throne, the Great Qin dynasty faced a new crisis and fell into a difficult situation. By stopping the gathering of the dragon vein qi, they would be able to temporarily defend against the Great Zhou dynasty's sneak attacks, but it would not benefit Great Qin at all. In the following war between two worlds, they could only resign themselves to fate and pray that the devil race experts would not attack them. Even though Shi Tianhao and the others would come to West Hill City, with the war reaching its climax, no one would be able to guarantee their safety. Even if Xianmen Tianzong became furious, the Great Qin dynasty would definitely suffer losses. No matter how they tried to take revenge, the dead would be dead, and it would be difficult for them to come back to life. If they continued to gather the dragon vein qi, most of the dragon vein qi would be taken away by the Great Zhou dynasty. Shi Zongtang would only be able to keep a small portion. It was not even a question of whether he was willing to do so, and it was still unknown whether the limited power would be useful. Shi Zongmao looked at Shi Zongtang on the throne. Both of their expressions were extremely serious. Shi Zongtang said slowly, "I, the former emperor, and you are the same. We don't like to put our fate in the hands of others, but right now, we can only trust the Daoist sect master and Xianmen Tianzong. Bear with it, and leave one last chance for the Great Qin dynasty in the future. It's better than letting the Great Zhou dynasty benefit for nothing." Shi Zongmao looked at Shi Zongtang and sighed. "That's the only way." Shi Zongtang immediately pointed at the golden fruit of Wei floating above the palace. The fruit of Wei flashed slightly and turned back into a five-colored ray of light, dispersing in all directions. Even the dragon vein qi that was gathering around the Great Qin dynasty paused slightly, and gradually calmed down. But right at this moment, a voice rang out in the sky above West Tomb City. "Yudu has returned, and the entire divine prefecture is facing a crisis. I'm also trying to gather the power of the human cultivation world to defend against the Yudu race. This is something that everyone in the human cultivation world is duty-bound to do. It's fine if the spirit is willing but the strength is insufficient, and I won't force you. However, the Great Qin dynasty clearly still has strength to spare, yet you want to protect yourself. That's not wise. Don't you know that when the nest is turned upside down, no egg can remain intact?" The expressions of Shi Zongtang and the rest changed slightly. That voice was from Emperor Zhou's Liang Pan. Then Shi Zongtang, who still had the dragon vein qi around him, immediately felt that something was wrong. Through the dragon vein qi, he could feel an extremely huge pressure coming from the other side. The violent power followed the dragon vein qi that hadn't been completely cut off, and attacked West Tomb City with a destructive force. The dragon vein qi couldn't be forcefully cut off, but the violent power could attack West Tomb City along the dragon vein qi. Shi Zongtang's gaze flickered, and he suddenly understood. "Liang Pan, you guided the power of the Grand Imperial Palace and the dragon vein qi to White Cloud Mountain?" Emperor Zhou's Liang Pan's tone was calm. "Quickly gather the dragon vein qi, or else the current West Tomb City won't be able to withstand the power of Yudu. Not only you, but the entire West Tomb City might be razed to the ground." As if to prove that he wasn't lying, the formation that shrouded West Tomb City started to shake violently. In the center of the formation, the sky above the Great Qin Imperial Palace flashed continuously. It looked like it was about to collapse at any moment. The strong practitioners of Great Qin that occupied the four corners and were activating the formation all felt the pressure. Those with weaker cultivations couldn't bear the pressure, and their primordial spirits started to suffer damage. In the main hall of the imperial palace, King Ruyang Shirzongmao roared at the sky with an expression of unwillingness. His magic power projection couldn't even be maintained and shattered. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.